What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle-earth, to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pipe Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro_ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. In this edition of Disguise Coverage, it will likely be the last episode with the double Christmas trees. I'm leaving them up through January. The big one will probably go away. The little guy will likely go back over there. Was riding out for some superstition throughout January, and then the Bills lost. And I was like, yeah, I like them. I'll keep them up, but they'll likely come down at the end of this week, which I know is why everybody tuned into this episode, because, I mean, there's not really anything to talk about. It's been a pretty slow news cycle for the Buffalo Bills the past couple of weeks. Last week at this time, we dove into... It's just tipping who says the Easter tree is due. Yeah, the little guy will be decked out in Easter full enough. Man, I'm always so terrible at this right there. Last week's episode, we dove into a multitude of head coaching candidates for the Buffalo Bills, including Clint Kubiak, Jesse Minter, Chris Shula, Nathan Shielhouse, and I ended, I should say. You know, I kind of ranked the guys that I wanted, who I was looking into. And at the end, we talked about Joe Brady and Brian Daboll. My voice is falling apart already. Joe Brady and Brian Daboll potentially being rumored candidates. I also talked about my gut feeling. I said this on multiple shows last week. My gut feeling was Joe Brady was going to be the head coach of the Buffalo Bills. I don't know why. Just felt it. And lo and behold, here we are. A week later, Joe Brady has been named Buffalo Bills head coach in, I think, somewhat of a surprising move for most fans or those on social media, those on the internet. We're going to dive into all of that tonight. Was it the right move? Was it not the right move? How it all looks in totality, the pros, the cons, what it means going forward. Some of the pieces that Joe Brady and this team will need going forward, a really, really, really fun defensive coordinator rumor that we're going to be diving into. So it'll be fun. And along the way, I know this is a very contentious time. So questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and everything you folks have who are watching here live, put it up into the live chat. As always, super chats get priority. Last week's episode was chock full of comments and thoughts from everybody in the chat. I almost didn't need to prepare any notes and could have just ran with everything in the chat. So if we go that way again this week, it's understandable and I get it. And yeah, let's turn into group therapy as we always do here and trying to make the show as engaging as possible. Let's just dive right into Joe Brady being hired as the Buffalo Bills head coach. I alluded to last week's episode. I ended last week's episode talking about Joe Brady and Brian Daboll and how I didn't really want either as head coach. I spoke individually on them. I don't have to rehash everything in Daboll. Comment there that just came in. Do I have a defensive coordinator choice in mind? I absolutely do. And I will be going into that defensive coordinator choice / wish in the back end of this episode. But sorry to kind of like tease or like put that out there. I talked about Daboll. I'm not going to get into it now because he's of no consequence to the Bills right now. Well, he's the Titans offensive coordinator now, supposedly. So some consequence, with the Titans being in the AFC and in the NFL. But I spoke on Joe Brady, and I'm still kind of at the same spot with him as I was last week and kind of talking about this hire. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit, and then we'll get to all the comments and have a back and forth as we normally do here on the show. I don't think the Joe Brady hire in and of itself is terrible. I don't think Joe Brady is as bad as he was made out to be this past year. I also don't think Joe Brady was as good or as great as he was made out to be the year prior when everybody was kind of anointing him as like the savior and the chosen one of the offense, which again was funny because everybody was just heaping praise upon him in the offseason. And then it felt like 6-7 weeks later, everybody wanted his head on a pike. But I never thought... we got a super chat. Thank you very much for being here, Jason. And thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate you. Jason says, a bit disappointed in the decision, but not surprised. The hire will make me feel a lot better if he can get a solid coaching staff in place. He really needs to get an OC under him and needs a strong DC. I guess I'll just dive into this now. One, because this is a good segue to a topic. I'll kind of come back to my original point here. I agree. One of the big things I think that's going to matter a lot for Joe Brady, and I don't think, again, what I'm about to say is super revelatory, who he chooses to bring in is going to be of extreme importance, especially with, how important the run game was to the Buffalo Bills offense this past season and the year before, and how that was really something that Joe Brady hung his hat on. Aaron Kromer's gone. Aaron Kromer was an integral part of the Bills run game. One, because he coached the offensive line and did a great job raising their floor and ceiling as a unit and as individual players, but also because he was an integral part of the run game design and putting those game plans together and kind of putting it out in execution and actuality and taking it from the chalkboard to the field. And now Aaron Kromer's gone. You've got a hole at center. You've got a hole at left guard. And then tying that into the offensive coordinator spot, Joe Brady apparently will still call plays. Fun little interesting nugget. Joe Brady's always been a guy who sits in the box to do the offensive coordinator job. Can't really have a head coach who's up in the box. So that means he's going to be calling plays from the sideline. I know it might seem like a small thing, but how does that change in vantage point? Going from, because it's a legitimate thing, like you're up in the box, you're able to see everything. You have the full, like all 22 sideline view live and in person. You can see the movings and the shakings of the opponent, different personnels and numbers coming out of the field, all that kind of stuff. Now you're going to be at eye level. You're on the sideline. You have more contact with Josh Allen. You have more contact with the inner workings of the game as the head coach. So how does that work for Joe Brady? Who does he bring in as offensive coordinator? Does he bring in someone who can lighten his load? And in what way? Because again, if Joe Brady's calling the plays, that means he's still running the offense. So who does he bring in as OC? Is it more of a figurehead position? Is it a vet, someone to help him run the show overall? Is it someone young and up and coming or extremely detailed to help him game plan and put things together to make, the weekly preparation aspect a little lighter for him, or the game day prep or game day running a little easier for him overall on the offensive side of the ball? And then from a defensive coordinator standpoint, if he's going to be running the offense, you need a defensive coordinator. You need the Steve Spagnuolo to the Andy Reid. You need the Lou Anarumo to Zach Taylor. You need someone who can completely run that side of the ball for you, so you don't need to worry about the defense. Where all you have to do is, again, the Andy Reid, you go and you knock on the door, you knock on Spags' door and you say, hey, how's the game plan coming this week? Oh, it's good. Awesome. If you need anything, give me a shout. That's what Joe Brady needs on the defensive side. I very much so want it to be someone in particular and specifically, which we will get into on the back half of this episode. But I think this is a fair thought all around, Jason. Thank you for being here and thank you for the super chat. Thanos Ron says, watch with the same players, RD gets a ton of sacks. We'll see. Maybe different scheme, different coordinator, different game planning, different play calling on that side of the ball. Could take everybody, ratchet everybody up and make everybody better. Could keep everybody the same. Everything could get worse. You never know. I'm going to go back and start to get to a bunch of these comments in a minute. But yeah, my issue with Joe Brady, I'm underwhelmed, I'll say, and it's not necessarily a Joe Brady thing. Again, I don't think Brady was as bad as he was made out to be this past year, just like I don't think he was as great as he was made out to be the year prior. I'm underwhelmed because of the struggles we saw for a couple of reasons. One, just him individually in a vacuum. The struggles we saw this year offensively and what they showed, some of the lack of adaptability, lack of creativity at times. He was a significant part of the shortcomings this team had this year and the year prior. And then he's an unknown quantity as a head coach. And kind of tying into the bigger picture, which we talked about last week, I think Sean McDermott was part of the problem. If we're just narrowing it down to this season, even last year as well, while, Brady's been here for 4 years, but the last two was the offensive coordinator. I think Sean McDermott was part of the problem. I understand him being fired. I think Brandon Beane was a significant part of the problem. I understand if he would have been fired. I think Joe Brady was a significant part of the problems of the problem or problems. I understood if he would have been let go. And just like that, all three of those guys were also a significant part of the successes and the wins that the team had, literally and figuratively. Just like there were the pros and cons and successes and failures and shortcomings for a lot of people within the organization, on field and off the field in the front office. But my thought with Joe Brady is that, similar to what I said last week, is there's so much culpability in the shortcomings of this team that kind of just narrowing down to one person or one thing, for me, doesn't feel good and doesn't necessarily add up. And with Joe Brady staying and essentially getting a promotion, Brandon Beane staying and getting a promotion, Sean McDermott going, it again all seems like they're laying all of this at Sean McDermott's feet. And maybe that's the case. And again, I'm not saying this to scapegoat or to make McDermott a martyr or seem like he was fine or great or I didn't want him gone. I'm not saying all that, and there are variables to know, like maybe McDermott had an influence on Brady, so on and so forth, all these things. But for me, there's just so much muddiness and interconnectedness in the shortcomings of this team the past couple of years that I preferred a fresh start across the board. And instead, we kind of got like a glimpse of a fresh start, but largely running it back with the same type of deal. That's kind of why I don't like it. It's not, Mina Kimes had a great take on this earlier today when she was talking about it and, kind of sum it up. She said, it's not the Joe Brady move in isolation. It's the totality of everything that we've seen and kind of how everything is moving in conjunction with one another. And that's where I'm at. Like, I don't think Brady's terrible in and of himself. I didn't think he was a terrible offensive coordinator. I liked some of the things they did down the stretch. I liked some of the wrinkles that we started to see down the stretch. I like some of the newness that we saw in the playoffs. I don't think his playoff game plans were bad. And on the whole, the Bills offense has largely been successful in his stead as offensive coordinator. But when they've struggled like all caps for that struggle. And they've looked almost helpless at times. Granted, Josh Allen has been part of that. And, we got to stop. We got super chat. Just a Tippy Canoe. Fantastic name as always. Thank you for being here, pretty much as always. And thank you for the super chat. The comment here is, if we can convince ourselves of Curtis Samuel separation metrics, there's no telling how optimistic we could talk ourselves into being. Go Bills. Well said. Well said. Well said. Well said. This is funny from Curtis saying, I also think Ant should refer to the new stadium as the Josh and get credit for it. That's funny. I like it. Oh, this is a funny comment too. All I know is if we run hook and ladder, we will lose. What's super funny about that is they executed 3 tremendous hook and ladders. Granted, you're probably not running that unless you absolutely need to and you're in dire straits. But it's crazy that they ran that 3 times to very successful results and lost all of those games. I think it's 3. It's really unfortunate. Claude saying, all this betrayal, this feels like a Godfather movie. It wasn't until today that I realized it was Joe Brady all along. I think that's, so again, it's the optics of all of it, but also just from a logistical standpoint, all the kind of hands in everything. Even last week, right? Terry Pagula makes that comment at the presser of, Brandon didn't want Keon, did blah, blah, blah. And then Brandon Beane walks it back and is like, no, I would never turn a pick in for someone who I didn't sign off on and didn't think we could have success with. I just had him ranked a little differently. The personnel department had him ranked a little differently than the coaching staff did. I would assume the coaching staff includes Joe Brady. I'm assuming Joe Brady was a Keon Coleman advocate, or did by coaching staff, they just meant Sean McDermott, or they just meant wide receivers coach Adam Henry. Again, there's all this muddiness, and only the Bills, the people behind closed doors, behind the curtain, only they know what actually happened or what was the deal. And for all we know, yes, Sean McDermott really could have been the source point for all of these troubles. He really could have been heavily and majority to blame for all the problems, and maybe jettisoning him and keeping everything else kind of as is for the most part, or to a degree, won't matter. And things will go higher from there. But I just think, Joe Brady's been part of the problem, and Brandon Beane's part of the problem, and Sean McDermott's part of the problem, and they only got rid of one of parts of the problem and kept 2 of them and moved them up more and gave them more oversight. And then some of the verbiage hasn't made sense. We're going to continue to get into that. But we got another super chat. Arthur, thank you very much for being here. That's pretty much always. And thank you for the super chat. Arthur says, bummed we didn't hire Udinski, but I didn't know anything about Udinski 2 weeks ago. At least being in the Bills should know what to expect for Brady. I think it's a very level-headed take. I think a lot of people get swept up in the newness of things, and like new means better just because it's new, or, you see a thread or a highlight or an interview on someone and it's like, man, that guy sounds great, I'm all on board. Similar, I think it's kind of like draft season, right? You see a highlight package of some guy and you're like, I want that guy. That guy's the best receiver. And you attach yourself to somebody that you didn't know about 2 months ago, but now you are full tilt, like on, yes, they have to draft this one guy. Yes, I need this one guy. And then they don't, and you're pissed off. But you really didn't know about this guy a couple weeks ago or a month or so ago. And I think this is pretty spot on from your Arthur. So thank you for commenting that. Thank you. Also, some of the pieces as well that I just didn't think added up a little bit. Jordan Schultz tweeted out earlier today, this directly from him on Twitter. He said, quote, what the Bills liked about Joe Brady and the main reasons they hired him per sources. 1, the CEO portion of the interview stood out the most. 2, his vision for how everything, we're going to come back to that CEO comment in a minute. 2, his vision for how everything would be structured from the head coaching seat was viewed as a quote unquote home run. 3, he also nailed the importance of alignment between the coaching and player personnel. For me, again, not to be negative with that, but Joe Brady, his vision for how everything would be structured from the head coaching seat was viewed as a home run by the Bills. And he also nailed the importance of alignment between coaching and player personnel. I would hope so. He's been in the building for 4 years. He's been the offensive coordinator for 2, and he watched that press conference last week. So, of course, he's going to hit on those points. He had the answers to the test before he took the test. So I would imagine he would apply those answers to the test. I would imagine he likely used those answers for the test. So, like them coming away and being like, man, he really blew us away with his answers. Well, probably because his answers sounded like yours and is what you wanted to hear. Not saying that's not what he actually believes, not saying that that won't work going forward. But of course it sounded that way. And of course you liked it. That just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And then you add in the other piece. So that CEO piece, right? That I mentioned in that tweet there from Jordan Schultz. And then you go and you listen to Ian Rappaport earlier tonight on NFL Network was talking about why the Bills hired Joe Brady. And he said a quote, this seemed to be more of, quote, we found the CEO of our football operation. That is what Joe Brady is, right? So if he's the CEO of the football operation, and that's what they viewed him as, the CEO was used multiple times, referenced multiple times by multiple different reporters, likely probably coming from the same source. But if that's the verbiage we're using to kind of champion this hire, but then he's still calling the plays and still running the offense, that makes it very hard for him to be the CEO and see everything if he has to get into the weeds with one side of the ball. It's a little contradictory. And that's why I just feel like there's so much, contradiction through everything we've seen from the last week. Brandon Beane gets the credit for building a deep or great roster to Terry Pagula. And, all the injuries happening this year is a testament to that. But we're not giving Sean McDermott or the coaching staff any credit for coaching up those practice squad guys and coaching through all those injuries and that adversity. There's just so many contradictory comments and statements that are made. Terry Pagula says that essentially, he didn't think Sean McDermott could be the one to get them over the hump and get them, past that proverbial playoff wall. But then he gets asked, how do you decide, if it's the roster construction or the coaching that's responsible for all the shortcomings? And he says that's a really hard question and he doesn't have an answer for that. But how do you not have an answer for that? You decided it was the coaching. So shouldn't you know and have an answer? Because that you made that decision because you believed it was the coaching. So how did you come to that decision? I'm just very tired of I feel like I'm nitpicking, but I'm not. There's just so many contradictions that I feel like are right in our face. And it's frustrating and annoying. And I kind of feel bad for Brady because, again, I don't think Brady is completely terrible. I would like to think in a positive way, he was a significant part of the reason the offense moved in line with league trends and current league meta to start, reducing their formational width, getting bigger body types at receiver. Hey, we're going to run the football. We're going to marry the run with the pass, even though they were kind of hit or miss on that a bunch and also didn't use play action as much as they should. But I would like to think that he had a significant hand in that decision offensively. But then again, I imagine he had a significant hand in wanting to bring Curtis Samuel in and wanting to bring Keon Coleman in and signing off on all these moves that didn't necessarily work for the offense and the team. So is that true? But it's fine. It's okay because he's a great CEO for you because he agrees with what you're saying, but also it's hard to be a CEO and he still has to run that side of the ball. And I guess it's Sean McDermott's fault for everything else. And I'm not saying all this to be completely sarcastic or be too negative. I'm just trying to highlight there's just so much muddiness. There's so much interconnectedness. There's so much collaboration that happens across the board on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis throughout these football teams. So it's just tough. And even, Claude says Brady was just as hamstrung by this roster and its lack of talent as Allen. He was otherwise successful, right? But didn't he also kind of build that offense? Like, he wanted to not, I'm assuming Brady was fine with not emphasizing the receiver position and going in another direction. So isn't he also part of the problem, just like he is part of the success? Which he is part of the success, obviously, but again, there's so much like devil's advocate you can play, and so much like this side versus that side, and arguments that you can make one way or another. And again, this is an ultimate, like, time will tell, right? Just how much of the problem was Sean McDermott. Was Brady right all along? Was Bean right all along? Yada, yada, all that kind of stuff. It's a major time will tell, which again is what I find frustrating about so much of it. I do think on the one hand, though, with Bean staying and Brady staying, I do expect some kind of big move this offseason. I think not to kind of prove that it was Sean McDermott, but I do think they're going to go out and try and make a big splash, as big as they can make, either at wide receiver or defensive end. And not even to the point of like, oh, it won't surprise me. I think that's going to happen. I think they're going to make a move. I think they're going to try and address their biggest flaws or faults and really come out swinging this offseason as much as they can. Now, it's not going to be the easiest thing because they are strict on the cap, which we're going to get into as we go forward in this offseason, but there are some moves they can make. Well, likely what I was going to plan tonight was kind of a end of season move forward recap on position groupings and free agents to target, the current depth chart, what it means, all that kind of stuff going forward. And then this news dropped today and kind of threw me for a loop. Yeah. Let's see. Brian, did you see the Jerry Hughes tweet? Y'all the best. Appreciate you, Brian. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the kind words. I did see that. I saw multiple Jerry Hughes tweets where he was essentially saying, like, McDermott, not to paraphrase, but I am paraphrasing, like, McDermott was the problem. And if you paid attention to 13 seconds and kept that same guy, you guys are an unserious franchise, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, he essentially kind of went in on McDermott. It was weird, but a lot of time had passed. I don't know what activated Jerry Hughes on Twitter and made him respond so much. But yeah, he essentially kind of went in on Sean McDermott. Again, to kind of sum it all up, I know we're going to start getting everything from the chat. I want to make sure I get to all these comments because there's a lot. But, I don't think Joe Brady is holistically bad. I never thought he was as great as he was made out to be. I don't think he's as bad as he was made out to be. But like Sean McDermott and like Brandon Beane, who I think you can say very similar things for, and I do at least, I just think they're all culpable significantly. And I think all their hands have blood on them to significant degrees. And just getting part of one is underwhelming to me a little bit. And just from the other candidates' perspective, yeah. I was never huge on Grant Udinski. I know that started to gain some traction. I wanted Clint Kubiak all along. I started talking about him in October, I think. I also really like Nathan Shieldhouse, the passing game coordinator and guy who does all the in-weekly play drawing and diagramming for Sean McVay, like Liam Cohen used to do, like Zach Taylor used to do. I really wanted a part of that tree. I wanted a part of the McVay-Shanahan tree, what it means to offenses, what it means to quarterbacks. I really just think, thought, and I currently think Josh Allen in the Shanahan or McVay system would be unreal. Like, those systems are so quarterback friendly, especially the Shanahan side of things. Like, it's so quarterback friendly that you drop in a player like that. I mean, Kyle Shanahan was going to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? And he sacrificed so much to go up and get Trey Lance because he believed that type of skill set. Again, I'm not saying Trey Lance and Josh Allen are the same type of guy, but he believed that type of skill set would take him to the moon. He was going to Super Bowls and NFC championships and all that, and he sacrificed all of it because he believed injecting that kind of athleticism and arm talent into his offense would take it to the moon. And Allen in the Shanahan system, or working with Clint Kubiak, who I also really like. I watched so much Seahawks tape this year throughout the year, offensively and defensively. I've watched so much Rams tape. I've been a fan of Shieldhouse since I saw whatever interviews were coming out with him like earlier in this season. So there were other moves I wanted. But you can give pros and cons to those, just like you can give pros and cons to Joe Brady. I don't think this is a death sentence. I don't think this is the worst god awful thing ever, but I am underwhelmed. Again, just because of the interconnectedness of the shortcomings of this team and Joe Brady's role in that, and then some of my own individual schematic frustrations with this offense going throughout this entire season. Even though, again, they were, from an advanced metrics standpoint, in a lot of ways, they were a very good offense again. But now you got changes coming about, right? You've got some questions on the offensive line. You've got questions with the offensive line coach in terms of who it's going to be. Does the run game suffer? Does it not? What do you do at wide receiver? How do you go? Who was responsible for the run game success? Was it Brady? Was it Cromer? Was it, Austin Goon? Was it someone else? Was it the individual players, kind of making all these cases? You're changing the offensive line. You've removed and added all these variables now at the same time. It's really interesting. I don't think this is the most ideal hire for the fan base, but I don't think it's as end of the world as it's made out to be. But for me, again, I am underwhelmed, but I am hopeful. But I am underwhelmed. And again, I think this is another move this offseason, these past couple of weeks, where there's just a lot of contradiction between, what's said versus what's actioned. And I think that's annoying and frustrating. I hate having to do read between the lines or oh, this is what was actually going on. That's annoying. It shouldn't be this complicated and frustrating for these pieces. Yeah. I'm going to dive into the live comments now, which I'm sure will spur more conversation. RJ, you were one of the people I thought about when this news dropped today because of the frustrations you've laid out in the comments here throughout the entire season. RJ says, honestly, can someone please make me feel better about this? I thought this team's issues were at OC and GM, and now both have promotions. Yeah, it's not great. Unplanned Disassembly says, today has been the most entertaining day as a Bills fan that I've had in a while. K. Amori, what's up, K. Amori? K. Amori says, the biggest question was going to be shifts and changes in defensive philosophy. This hire is no different. Don't love or hate the hire. Go Bills. I think that's fair. Again, I'm in a similar boat. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I'm underwhelmed. There were guys I would have rather gone with, multitude of other guys who were also hired in other spots. I honestly, even though I don't love him as head coach, I would have rather had Mike McDaniel as head coach than Joe Brady. Even though I don't really want Mike McDaniel as a head coach, but I just value his offensive mind so much and schematically what he is. But I wouldn't have been completely thrilled with McDaniel as head coach, but I would have been more excited for what it meant for the offense schematically and for Allen in particular. Yeah, so we'll see. Swoon Gaming says the issue was defense, not offense. Larry just says straight up, what a letdown. Tristan, yeah, I'm interested in what the staff hires will look like. Absolutely. Raymond says, but how will the Pats lose with the trees gone? Well, hope maybe the trees staying up is what's keeping the Pats afloat. I should take them down immediately. Mo says, great hire. K. Mori says, Valentine's Day tree when? Probably next week. I'll take the little tree over there and dress it up in red garland and make it a Valentine's Day tree. This is very funny from Pretzels and Gas Jets says, if this was January 2025, we'd all be saying this was the best hire ever. Yeah, it's funny how a year, just a change in a year makes. I mentioned it earlier, going into this season, if you told everybody before this season started, hey, at the end of the season, Sean McDermott's going to be fired and Joe Brady will be promoted to head coach, I think that would probably get an 80% approval rating easily. And now I feel like it's 50-50 at best, but maybe lower. I feel like it might be 40% approval. I could be wrong. Bob says, how is Brady going to call plays, get in-game decisions right at critical moments, and not get schooled going up against grizzled defensive coordinators? That's a fair question. That's why his staff is going to be super important. That's why it's hard to be a head coach who runs an entire side of the ball, right? You need that. At minimum, you need the other side of the ball to be run completely by someone else who is very good at doing that. Right? Mike McDonald runs the defense for the Seahawks. Clint Kubiak runs the offense, right? Kyle Shanahan runs the offense. He's had Robert Saleh run the defense. He's had Steve Wilkes run the defense. He's had DeMeco Ryans run the defense, right? You need somebody who can run that entire other side at a minimum. And then we talked about the other pieces too, right? Like who's Brady's OC going to be? What role does he play? Offensive line coach, all that kind of stuff. RJ bringing more heat, saying, I'm genuinely curious how the organization sells this to the fans. It took them 10 days to completely alienate 90% of the fans, from scapegoating McDermott to that presser to Joe Brady. Brian saying, I was watching Eric and you at the gym. Appreciate you. I don't think it was intended, but it left me quite optimistic. And then he mentions Jim Leonhard. We will be talking about that in a little bit. Just a typical news says, we all need to take a deep breath and remind ourselves we are not a mile away from the ultimate goal. Let the other pieces fall into place. Level-headed and well said. I'm seeing RJ saying, I'm so jealous of many other teams, young, smart coaches. Comment here, I would love to be a fly on the wall in the McDermott house. Good comment from Bob. Question, I should say. What kind of caliber OC will Brady get if he's the one designing and calling plays? I think this is a good question, and I wonder that as well. I don't know if he's going to look for – is he going to look for someone to kind of be a right hand for him in running the team? Is he going to look for someone who can help kind of take stuff off his plate for the offense, pregame or in-game? I think it's interesting. Larry saying, I was really hoping we get Yadinsky or Kubiak. Really like Yadinsky's story. He says, that's fair. Doug saying, something that has felt so weird is that we keep getting slapped in the face with the fact that the offense has been top 5 the last 2 years, but this year, everything in our offense has been difficult. I think that's a fair point. I also think there's context to a lot of things, right? Like points scored, yards, even some of the advanced metrics, right? Like you could look at EPA per play, but then what's the success rate on things? How do little conversions on 3rd down and 4th down, change the metrics and skew things a bit positively or negatively. And that was a big factor for me, right? Like I do think the offense was good, and it's hard to not look at them, EPA per play and DVOA and success rate and all these different little pieces that speak well to them at times in certain areas. But it did feel like there was a bit of a slog for this offense. And I even felt that a little bit in 2024. And I know Allen won the MVP, but I talked about it going into the offseason last year, that it felt like the in-structure pass game wasn't great. And then we saw it again this year. And it wasn't just purely because of the weapons. It was some of the schematics of it and some of Allen's decision-making as well. And I don't know how much that changes. Granted, I think they're going to try and, upgrade and tweak the wide receiver position. But there's just the other things, not going away from 5-man protections against the Texans when your offensive line is getting eaten and Spencer Brown's playing with one arm, plus you're leaving him in there. Like, but was that a Cromer call or not? Like, again, a lot of interconnectedness, a lot of muddiness. Curtis saying the Broncos fired their OC, so they're probably promoting Webb. Yeah, they fired Joe Lombardi earlier today. I don't know if that's to keep Davis Webb or not, but it would be fair. It would be fair. Charles saying, I was bummed, like most, about the Brady hire at first, but I'm more open-minded. Keep the culture, but maybe a looser team. I do think there's something to be said for continuity from an offensive identity perspective, or for a comfortability with Josh Allen perspective, or maybe even if for a team culture perspective. I do think that's fair. RJ says the offense has been extremely difficult the past 2.5 years since Brady took over. I wouldn't say extremely. I do think they've gotten stuck in neutral, stuck in the mud at times, but I wouldn't say extremely difficult. And then RJ also says the longer he's been here, the more difficult it has been. I agree somewhat, but I don't completely agree. Swin saying, just think if Cooks could catch the ball. If that gets ruled a catch, or if he catches it cleanly, or if Allen doesn't skip that pass to Khalil Shakir on 3rd down and they go up, I don't know, 30 at minimum, 30-23 instead of 27-23. Or if Cole Bishop doesn't bite on the flare route from the running back on 3rd and 11 when they're playing inverted Tampa 2 and allow Cortland Sutton to get behind him on the dig for a conversion. Yeah. Crazy. Bob says, how can Bean say the talent is there and then hire the guy who is underwhelming in use and design with them? Another contradiction, fair point. Daniela saying, confusing as to why they would throw him under the bus for the Coleman pick, but then promote him? ? Makes me nervous for the wide receiver position. Doug says, basically what we're hearing is my 2018 Ford Fusion wasn't working for me, so I went and got a 2021 Ford Fusion. I like that. Comment here from MJ saying, my optimism for the move is growing. Bill says, still so confusing. Okay. Oh, Chad saying, I think Bean didn't use the 2026 first for Waddle because he knew they would need it if they moved on from McDermott in the next regime. Ooh, a little foresight there. Maybe, maybe. Mm-mm-mm. MJ says the root word of fan is fanatic. Get out of here with your logic. That's fair. Patrick saying, and a lot of people have said this, Chris Sims and Ryan Fitzpatrick support the Brady hiring, so I'm less sad at least. LOL. Yeah. Again, it depends on who you listen to. Certain people are going to like it. Certain people aren't. If you trust the masses over individuals, if you trust certain individuals over others, again, it's going to be time will tell. I don't think anybody can be right now in terms of forecasting or, diagnosing what the Bills are going to be. But I think it's fair to be on either side. I think it's completely fair to be stoked or fine or happy with this. I think it's fine to be pissed and want to jettison this team into the sun. Understood. Oh, Swin saying, I'm not concerned with the optics and how McDermott was fired. I'd rather go backwards than continue to lose in heart-wrenching matters in the playoffs with McDermott. I think that's fair. The optics for me is more of, again, how interconnected everything was and then how it all went down and the reasoning behind it and the contradictions with it, right? Like Terry saying, it's A. And then they're like, okay, how do you decide on A? And he's like, ooh, that's a hard question. I don't know how to answer that. It's like, what? And then some of the things that Bean said versus what Pagula said, and then now keeping Joe Brady. I just think it's all muddy. That's the way I'm going to keep saying it. I think it's muddy, the optics. And I agree. You'd rather go backwards than continue to lose in heart-wrenching fashion or matters. I would rather have a fresh start overall just because I think everything is so interconnected. Like, send Bean, send McDermott, send everybody. Let's get a new. But again, I understand. Like, then you're blowing everything up, and now Pagula is the man with his finger by the button. Do you want him making the next hire for GM or coach? Do we really want that? We've seen what's happened with the Sabres. It's January. The Senior Bowl is coming up. The scouting combine's coming up. You're going to lose all your player personnel files and scouting stuff. Do you really want to blow up the front office? Yada, yada. Like, there's pros and cons to all of it. I wanted a fresh start completely. Let's get all the bad juju out as much as possible, from a roster construction and an in-game management and schematic standpoint on the field. Obviously they didn't. Yeah. Doug saying Joe Brady has his problems, but he's not terrible. However, the way this has all gone down has just stunk to high hell. I still have no trust in Bean to build a roster after all of this. And again, I think that's another symptomatic piece of all of what the shortcomings have been the past couple of years, right? How much is on Bean? How much is on McDermott on the offensive side? And like, how much is on Joe Brady versus, what was given to him from a roster standpoint? But how much of that did he want to bring in? It's all interconnected. It's all a little bit of A, a little bit of B, a little bit of C. It's all muddy and messy. Charles says, great roster, good coaching, except Brady. MJ says, smash that like button, friends. Yeah, if you are able to smash that like button, that would be greatly appreciated. I would greatly and sincerely appreciate that. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. Josh Allen, first active quarterback in history to hire a head coach. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't get to these other super chats. I didn't see them before I scrolled back up. Jason, thank you again for being here and for the super chat. Jason says 2 questions. Who can pair up with Brady the best? A legit offensive coordinator. Also, we've seen the last days of Dawson Knox. I'm going to start from the Knox piece and go backward, I guess. I think Dawson Knox's skill set and role is important on this team. Dalton Kincaid cannot and should not be a regular inline blocker like Dawson Knox is, or like Jackson Hawes is. And Jackson Hawes cannot and should not be aligned, split out wide or in the slot like Dalton Kincaid and like Dawson Knox are. Dawson Knox is almost like the light and the dark with how he's able to live in between Dalton Kincaid and Jackson Hawes. And I think that skill set is important for this team unless they load up at wide receiver and start to go back to like a really heavy 11 personnel, marry the run in the pass. We're going to go less 12. We're going to go less 21 and 22. But I do think heavier personnel packages are still going to be a significant part of this team. Dawson Knox just makes too much money. I'm fine with him as a player. I didn't love the contract when he got it. I like it even less now, but I think his skill set is useful. I think his role is useful considering he's the bridge between Jackson Hawes and what Dalton Kincaid is. He's a little bit of Kincaid and he's a little bit of Hawes, and that allows him to kind of not be as much of a tell or a vulnerability in either, right? He just makes too much money. I'm torn on whether or not he gets cut. I hate advocating for people losing their jobs. I would cut him because I think you can take that cap savings and then reallocate it towards bringing someone in for much cheaper that can do his skill set or his role, and then using the other money to also upgrade it a couple other pieces as well, or another piece. But I don't want him gone or his skill set gone. He just makes too much money, unfortunately. I think Josh Allen is a wrench in all of this, though, because that's his buddy. I don't know if they're going to want to send him packing because I think it might upset Josh Allen. And I don't know if that's a good thing to say or a bad thing to say. But yeah, I think it should be because of the money he makes. But yeah, I think it's a little muddy again with Josh Allen. And then your first question, who can pair up with Brady the best, a legit offensive coordinator? Yeah, I think you can make the case either way. It could be somebody who's more like a passing game coordinator, run game coordinator type of dude who's great at the pre-week game planning and scouting and situational aspects. It could be an older type of vet, who's got OC experience or maybe even head coaching experience and knows how to run a team or run a side of the ball and can kind of be a right hand or I'm thinking of the dude that was like Jon Snow's right hand when he was going to King's Landing and everything like that. I forget his name. The dude who was the smuggler. I say it in my head all the time because I replace a word in a song with his name. It's going to drive me nuts. Someone in the chat is going to tell me, and I'll scroll to it later. It's going to infuriate me until I get it. Yeah, do you bring in somebody who can be like your right hand? Like, do you get yourself a Tyrion Lannister to go with like your Daenerys or whatever? I know that's the opposite side of it. Oh, what's that guy's name? I got to scroll to the end. Somebody tell me. What's the name of the guy who is Jon Snow's right hand? Davos. Thank you, David. Oh, Davos Seaworth. Oh, driving me insane. Driving me absolutely insane. Thank you so much. That was going to absolutely drive me bonkers. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think you can make the case either way. I think it could be, if Brady's going to run the offense, I would rather it be a guy who's just extremely detailed at the game planning piece and kind of helping him in prep so he can continue to run like the bigger parts of the team. But again, if you hire the right DC, he can be in the weeds a little bit, and I don't think that's as bad. But you got to have somebody too that has a game day pulse, a touch on the reins, because if he's got to get involved in a challenge or a decision or something like that, like you need somebody to still kind of keep things from getting off the rails a little bit. I think you can make the case either way. I'm 55-45 towards like a schematic guy who can help him with prep, but I could also be swayed. First and 15th, too, says everyone getting promotions says a lot about McDermott. In theory, yeah, it says that the organization thought he was the problem and everything else was kind of fine. Dat 1982 says, is using a baseball reference in the NFL a red flag? I don't think so. I use a lot of non-sports references for football. I use baseball references, basketball references, hockey references, soccer references. I hope not. I hope it's not a red flag. We'll see. What else? Yep, as Nick says, but he's still calling plays. Pretty conflicting reports. RJ saying if he's the CEO, then he shouldn't be calling the offense, but he is calling the offense. Very fair. Very fair. Man, RJ, I'm just looking at your comments and you were just on a downward spiral, which isn't funny, but fair. Swin says, people in Buffalo have a hard time with change and are way too worried about this. I'm really optimistic about this and excited for the future. I don't think it's necessarily that people in Buffalo have a hard time with change. I think it's just how everything has come about and what's still staying and where the problems of this team can be put significantly on the people that are staying, but they're still here. So it's just questioning, kind of what people are going for. And then you follow up there. People are way too worried about the semantics. I do think that's fair. I do think a lot of people worry about the semantics or the optics, but I think the source point of the frustrations are a lot of people had questions about Brady and Bean and McDermott, and only one of those are gone. And then the way it went about, I think, kind of made people even more frustrated. But I think that's a fair point. Joe saying, hey, Anthony, huge fan of the show. Just had a question. Can you tell me when the pain will end? Well said. I can't tell you that. Bob says, Anthony, you're not being sarcastic. The contradictions in their statements versus actions are in full view. I think that's fair. Oh, Bill saying CEO is not a leader of men; it's a corporate slot. Multiple people have made that reference in the chat, kind of being like a slave to the shareholders and things like that, and all those kind of deals. Yes, Swin. McDermott was definitely a problem. But I think there were other problems as well. Roster construction, contracts that were handed out, in terms of extensions and guys that were signed, draft picks that were made. But again, how much of that is like who pushed for those picks? Was it defensive coordinator? Was it the offensive coordinator? Was it Sean McDermott? Was it a position coach? Was it Brandon Beane? Was it a scout? Was it Terry Pagula? Like, I don't know any. According to who I forget who said the other day. I think Tyler Dunn said like Terry Pagula said like Patrick Mahomes was amazing and he knew Mahomes would be great, but he didn't want to put his neck out on the line and tell anybody what to do at that time. I think that's I'm not even going to get to that, but yeah, I don't know. There's so much moneyness at this point. Yeah, but like I said, McDermott was part of the problem, 1000%. But I also think Bean was part of the problem. I think Brady was part of the problem. I think Babbage was part of the problem. I think there's a ton of people that are part of the problem, and a good chunk of those ton of people are still in the building. Charles says Max Crosby. God, what would I do for Max Crosby? I would love that. I would love that. I would love that. Joe says, okay, being serious now, I do think the optics of getting a good wide receiver, but also one that has legitimate impact and gravity could be the literal difference for their offense and the team outlook. I don't necessarily disagree. If you get a game-changing defensive end and some kind of addition at wide receiver at the top end of the depth chart, I think that would be sweet. Everybody stays healthy. Instead of everybody eats, everybody stays healthy. That's the new Bills mantra. I like that. I like that. I like that. I like that. Oh, Frank says, come on, fellas. You know you want to talk about the hypothetical Jim Leonhard scheme fits. I absolutely do. I'm waiting to get into that, but I just want to get through more of the comments because I know there's so many people who are here and commenting. Yeah, and K. Morris says, the guy with the least blood on his hands, Chris Tabor, is gone. Sad face. 1,000%. I wanted Tabor to stay. Frustrating. James says, is Babbage still the DC? As of now, I believe so. Swin says, Allen is LeBron. He will carry this team to wins. Don't worry about it. I don't necessarily disagree, but I just can't never get behind like they have I can't never get behind like fully the mantra of like, oh, they have Josh Allen, they'll be fine. They've had Josh Allen this whole time and they haven't got over the hump. Like not one person can do it. Like you need a supporting cast in some way, shape, or form, off the field, on the field. Offensive side, defensive side, like even with Mahomes, like all the runs that Mahomes made to the Super Bowl and won, right? How many of those runs were aided by Chris Jones plays? How many game-clinching plays did Trent McDuffie make on the defensive side of the ball, or Jordan Reed or Nick Bolton making big plays when they needed them? Like, let alone what Spags is calling and Andy Reid is calling, and Juju Smith-Schuster steps up and makes a play, and also Mahomes had Travis Kelce. Like, I think Allen is the type of player that, again, can get you a bunch of wins, but there's a big difference between having a guy that can get you wins and then having the right team plus the guy to get you to a Super Bowl. So many things have to align to get a Super Bowl for a team, and I think that's hard to put on anyone's shoulders. Not to mention, too, Allen has shown, for as good as he's been in the playoffs, Allen has shown that he can still self-destruct and make poor decisions and turn the ball over and be part of the problem. Even though he's also a big part of the solution, he shows he can be a part of the problem too. So I don't think putting it all on his shoulders is fair to him. And I also don't think it's the smart thing to do all the time, because it shows he's shown a propensity to kind of still be a little wonky at times. I do think he's a great, obviously, starting point, and that's the position one, franchise quarterback, and all that kind of stuff. But I just think the blanket statements of like Allen is this, or like Allen, they have Josh Allen, they'll be fine, don't worry about it. Like I see this from a ton of people on. I understand the notion of it. I just think it's so much more complicated than that, and I think it takes so much more than that. Arthur says, this feels like the safest choice for the offense. Avoid some disaster scenarios where the OC doesn't mesh with Josh, but we don't get someone who challenges Josh and makes the offensive unstoppable. MJ says, who is our offensive line coach target? Can't suggest building a time machine to kidnap young Aaron Kromer. That's cheating. Someone else said that to me, I think on Twitter or Blue Sky. I don't remember which. Like, it's simple. Oh, no, that was you, MJ, I think. Build a time machine. Yeah, get young Aaron Kromer and do this. So, yeah, that was super funny. I like that. Bill says, get Justin Jefferson and Max Crosby, and I will like the hire. That's fair. Fair, 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 fair. Yeah, RJ says the double trees might be helping the Pats right now. I need to take both of the trees down, I guess. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm making my way through comments. Mr. Troll says Brady is definitely culpable. Yes, yes, yes. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, the Ford Fusion quote is perfect. 716 Matt, this is a great comment. A Kubiak's a Kubiak, but Joe Brady could be anything. He could even be a Kubiak. Well done. Nice Family Guy reference. I love that. A boat's a boat, but the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. You know how much we wanted one of those. So why don't we take the boat? We'll take the box. I love that. Ryan, you know me too well with the sarcasm here, saying Ants tore up. We didn't go with Gruden as head coach. Yeah, I would. Man, if they would have hired John Gruden as head coach, oof. I'm not gonna, yeah, I would have been furious. You know me well. Well done. Well done. Joe said, I'll forgive if Joe Brady if the Bills open the season with 5 play action passes in a row. Oh, Joey, next year's schedule looks to be difficult. What would you consider a good start record-wise with this new regime? Oh my God, there's so many variables and so hard to answer that question right now. I got to see who the DC is and what they do in free agency and the draft. As of right now, hold on. Let me Google the Bills 2026 schedule. I know it's tough, but that's all I remember. Okay. They got the Dolphins, the Pats, the Jets, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Bears, the Lions, the Ravens. That's home. And then away, Dolphins, Pats, Jets, Broncos, Packers, Raiders, Vikings, Texans, Rams. That schedule sucks right now. I don't want to play this game because I think everyone's gonna be mad at me. Right now, I would say, all right, Dolphins, you should sweep the Dolphins. That's 2. You should beat the Pats at least once. That's 3. You should beat the Jets both times. That's 5. Chiefs, depends on when they play him and if Mahomes is back, but they've shown the capacity to beat the Chiefs, so that's so 2, 3, 5. That could be 6. They can beat the Chargers. That's 7. They can beat the Bears. That's 8. Lions will be tough, but they can win that game. Anything that I think is too tough, I'll kind of keep it minimum. Lions will be tough. That could be 8, but they can win that game. Bears, honestly, let me backtrack. Bears, they can win that game. That'll be tough. Ravens, we'll see what they are, but that game's going to be tough because they're going to be healthy. Broncos, they can beat. Packers, they can beat. Raiders, they should beat. That's 9. Vikings, they should beat. That's 10. I think 10 wins is a fair baseline over under. Maybe 9 to play devil's advocate and be safe. I think 9, just spitballing off the top of my head. But again, a lot of these teams are going to change on both sides, right? And we got to see where they're at. RC says, going back to the tight end conversation, hey, you don't think Jackson Hawes can play that role, Ant? I think Jackson Hawes is more athletic than he gets credit for, and he can do some more things in the pass game that he gets credit for. I don't think he's as athletic as Knox and can be what Knox is as a pass catcher. I don't think he's completely devoid of being a pass catcher. I just think he's more limited to like the underneath and the very short intermediate. Like he's not that guy that you're sending on a corner route or a sail route into the intermediate, 10 to 15 yards down the field. He's not that guy where you're going to run like a half boot or a roll and fake the corner and then have him bend back across the field to the post or on a crosser. I would love him to be. I just don't think he's that. I think he's a perfect tight end 3 or a very good tight end 2. If your tight end 1 is an overall like guy who's just legit as a pass catcher and a blocker. Like if he was the tight end 2 to George Kittle or McBride or even Bowers, who can block a little bit, like pairing him with a true 1 who can do both. It's just that like Kincaid's limited as a 1 because he's more of a wide receiver than he is a tight end. But I do think Jackson Hawes can do more as a pass catcher. I just don't think it's to the level of Dawson Knox because he doesn't have that athleticism that Knox has. Oh, this comment, cut Knox and draft Sadiq. I would love for them to draft Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon. Problem is you're going to have to use a first-round pick to do it, I think, and I think they're going to have bigger fish to fry in the first round there. but I don't think this is crazy, and I have thought of it. I just haven't said it out loud because I don't want everybody to yell at me. Rockpile Report says hiring Joe Brady's like Virgil going to WCW. It's the same thing, just under a different name. Raymond says, if you question Brady's pass game, wouldn't you want a pass game coordinator? Yeah, I think that's fair. Again, for me, I don't know how much of him being being hamstrung by the receiver pieces. But I think I think I think the Bills offense can stay the course with what they've done. I just think they need some tweaks. I don't necessarily question Brady's pass game as a whole. I question like the in structure and known passing down and distance and situation aspect. But if you can just add a better couple body types at the top of the depth chart that have verticality or somebody that can win one-on-one, I start to feel a lot better. And also, again, it depends on that pass game coordinator, right? If it's somebody from a spread type of system, I don't know if that's necessarily going to work here. It depends on who the pass game coordinator is. If that pass game coordinator was Nathan Shieldhouse, yeah, give him to me right now. Give him to me right now. That's my dream offensive coordinator would be Nathan Shieldhouse. I just don't know if he's going to leave the Rams to come to Buffalo. I did think it was interesting that the Bills interviewed him last night. That got me really hopeful. I really, really, really love Nathan Shieldhouse. If he were to come here as the OC, that would be great. Rams pass game coordinator, offensive coordinator, Iowa State in 2023. I think he'd be a good fit. I love what he does. So yeah, I understand where you're getting at. I don't think you're wrong. For me, it just depends on what kind of pass game they are coming from. Sorry, I kind of fleshed my thoughts out there in real time. Swin says, what would you trade for Justin Jefferson? Oh, sheesh. A lot. I don't know. I think that asking price would be too crazy. I think that's the type of deal where you're giving up like 2 firsts and 2 seconds, or 2 firsts, a second and a third from different drafts, and they need somebody like that. But also like this, I hate having this conversation because it comes back to the moves that like haven't panned out. Like they need their draft picks, they need that draft capital, but also like the draft capital are still just like dart throws and swings at the plate that could be awesome or could be nothing. Again, that's go back to the Peter Griffin joke, like Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson, but a draft pick could be anything. It could even be Justin Jefferson. It's like, so why don't you take Justin Jefferson? We'll take the draft picks. I would trade a lot for Justin Jefferson. I'm thinking of something in my head and I'm going to say it out loud. I think I would trade. I don't want to. I don't know how to verbalize this. I don't want to say I'd trade more for Max Crosby. I would rather do the trade for Max Crosby. I think the defense needs a premier defensive end more than the offense needs a premier wide receiver. I think you can still get like a pretty good wide receiver 2 type of deal, or get some rookie that fits with the skill sets and traits and still have you be good enough, or kind of get you over the top. Again, all jokes aside, like Brandon Cooks legitimately helped this offense. So just get yourself a better wide receiver. It doesn't have to be this huge stud. Obviously Justin Jefferson would be absolutely crazy and sick. I would trade a lot for Justin Jefferson. It would be tough. Oh, I hate having these conversations because all these previous roster, failures come back. Ryan says Stannis is the rightful king. Well done. Joe says, I'm okay with cutting Knox or asking him to take a pay cut. To be honest, I don't know if he gets a new, more favorable deal elsewhere versus Buffalo, where he's been in for years. Judy says, did you speak about Jim Leonhard yet? No, I swear I'm getting it to in the next little bit here. I'm excited to talk about it. Appreciate you, Rock and Roll Blues. Thank you for saying great show. Oh, sorry, Jason, I missed the super chat. I didn't get the alert. Thank you for the super chat again. You're crushing it. I really appreciate your generosity and the donations and you just being here in the comments. That's awesome. Jason says, I think the bad contract now is Bernard. Way too injury prone. I'll tell you this. I think a big question going into this offseason is, was Terrell Bernard's dip in play solely due to the injuries, or was it something more? Because even when he's healthy, he's not a dude who's going to excel at getting off blocks. He's not a dude who's going to excel at block deconstruction. And if you're not going to protect him inside with dudes who can eat blocks and mitigate displacement and keep interior offensive linemen from getting to him, he's going to keep getting thrown around. I think the injuries were a big part of his struggles. I do think he should move to Will, and they should get a middle linebacker that has a bit more size and thumping and downhill ability to his game, a la Devin Lloyd or like a Foye Aluakon, someone like that who has size combined with the athleticism rather than just having two small 220-pound linebackers. But the injury piece is a huge, huge part of it. He's been banged up before. We continue to see it. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Oh, comment here from 3896. I don't think Shaheed is the quote unquote answer, but it would be nice to have him. Even that, I would take that. I would take Rashid Shaheed in an instant. Frank says, who's your favorite / most realistic wide receiver option? I think Shaheed is in that conversation from a free agency standpoint. I haven't fully dove into the wide receiver pieces. Shaheed is up there, though. I don't think he's going to break the bank. I think he's a better route runner than he gets credit for, and I think his speed and verticality absolutely opens up everything. DF Forever says, Ant, to be plain, I'm doing everything I can in the way of positives, and I just can't name enough. I think that's fair. I think it's fair to kind of see the roster and kind of look at it and be downtrodden on it or be encouraged. There's a lot. See a lot of, trade up from Makai Lemon. That's fair. I see the comments. Who do I want for DC? I'm coming in. We're going to talk about DC in a minute. Claude says, Ant, John Gruden knows talent. He'd be able to tell you which guys are football players. I don't know if this is sarcasm or not. Yeah, he probably would. I feel like a lot of coaches could do that, though. But I don't know if he's current enough or too outdated. And also him just lining up with Barstool, I don't like. And then the way he exited the league, I don't want any parts of him. Although I do respect, his football mind and his knowledge and the system he comes from. But I want no parts of John Gruden. James saying, yes, Bosa and Epinesa are free agents. Absolutely. Okay, Moriarty comments to DF Forever and says, yeah, if we can get a true number one wide receiver, I think it helps everybody. Shakir, Kincaid, Palmer, it absolutely does. Absolutely it does. This is a great one from Swin. Yeah, Michael Wilson or Alec Pierce are intriguing free agents. I really wanted Alec Pierce. I just don't think it's going to be possible now. I think Alec Pierce is going to get paid. I think Alec Pierce is going to get like almost $20 million a year. I think somebody's going to pay big for that speed and that athleticism and that ball tracking and the plays downfield. Someone's going to pay big for Alec Pierce, and I think it takes the Bills out of the running, unfortunately. Michael Wilson is one I like from Arizona. I liked him at Stanford. I like him now. And yeah, I'm not crazy, right? And we're not crazy. Like, Michael Wilson is a UFA, right? Right. I'm going to his contract right now. Yeah, he is. No, he's not. He's a UFA in 2027. God. But I would take Michael Wilson. I thought he was a free agent too. A lot of people commenting that they don't like Joe Brady. DF Forever says 1 first, 2 seconds, and Ed Oliver for Justin Jefferson. Ooh, I don't hate that. Stevie saying Bean's extension of Bernard was diabolical. Oh, okay. Sorry, Claude. Claude says total sarcasm, Ant, on that comment that I read from Claude earlier. I apologize. It's hard to read sarcasm through things at times. This was in reference to Claude's comment about Ant, John Gruden knows talent. I figured it was. That's why I said I don't know if this is sarcasm or not. I thought there was a hint of it. I apologize for not being able to read between the lines there. I've had to do so much reading between the lines. Now it's tough, man. My brain is fried. Dominic. What's up, Dom? Dom says, everyone in this chat apparently watched a different 2.5 years of Joe Brady as OC than I did. He's been way above average, even great, and he's the most accomplished young OC available. Based on who's available. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think, especially too, from like accomplished perspective, yeah, there's a lot of unknowns with Yadinsky. He's probably more accomplished than Kubiak. I don't think that's wrong. I think that's fair. Again, I don't hate the hire. I'm just underwhelmed by it to a degree. But I think that's fair. Okay. Gruden is the best at calling Spider 2Y banana. I love that. All right. Now, I'm going to get to something everybody's asked about and the part that I wanted to get to the most. Let's talk about a really exciting defensive coordinator rumor, Jim Leonhard. Now, I got to stop because we have a super chat. Hold on. I need to pull up the actual tweet for Leonhard so I can read it correctly. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the super chat. This super chat says, one, thank you for being here. Two, thank you for the donation. Super chat says, so Brady has to win 2 or more playoff games. What happens if he doesn't? Does he get fired? Because that's the floor they set with this move. But he signed for 5 years. None of this makes sense. I don't think they're operating. I'll tell you this. I don't think they're operating on if he has to win playoff games now. Like if this team doesn't make the playoffs, I don't think he's going anywhere. I think they're committed to him long term and kind of turning things around a little bit. I don't think he gets fired if he doesn't win less than 2 playoff games. I do think there's going to be a ton of backlash. Man, I think everything's really going to burn. Like if they don't make the playoffs, or if they lose ugly in the wild card round, or if they start out bad, there's going to be a lot of people with torches and pitchforks and wanting heads on pikes. I could see that 1,000%. I don't know if that's actually really a fun question while we're here. For those in the chat, I'm going to start to get into Jim Leonhard in a minute. But I want to know from those in the chat, with Brady as head coach, again, and we have a lot to go, right? What's free agency going to bring? What's the draft going to bring? Who's the defensive coordinator, OC, offensive line coach, all that. What does Joe Brady have to do? And or tying that to Brandon Beane, what do the Bills have to do this year to make this a successful season? Like, does it have to be like they have to make the playoffs, and that's fine. They have to win 2 playoff games. They have to get the AFC Championship. They have to get to the Super Bowl. They have to win the division. Like, does anybody have a qualifier? I think it's a really thought-provoking question. I like this. I know you didn't mean it this way, but I kind of like this. For me, I just don't think they are going to set a limit for him in terms of like a bar of what he has to get to. For me to have a successful year, I think this team needs to make the playoffs again. I think they need to stay on the same trajectory, either win the division, get to the playoffs, and win at least 1 playoff game. Like that's what you have to continue to do. I think that's what you have to do. Man, that's a really thoughtful question. I like that. All right. Oh, Marty says no qualifiers on this year, but they need to make the chip by year 3. Okay. Richard's saying to be successful, they have to win the East, let alone, I'm guessing something else. Jeffrey says win the 5th, 6th, 7th games of the season. Win those, we get the 1 seed. Fair. They have to win the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup, and the dodgeball tournament. I like that. Yeah, season script definitely comes into play, says James. Very fair. Mike Check says Brandon Beane, I trust. I Beane leave. That's funny. Just make the playoffs. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Jim Leonhard. Why are we talking about this? Adam Schefter tweeted at 2:47 this afternoon. Sources are saying Broncos defensive pass coordinator Jim Leonhard is expected to be a leading candidate to become the next defensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. I tweeted this immediately that this would, I think my exact words were, words cannot express how much I want this. I could forgive a lot of things if the Buffalo Bills named Jim Leonhard their defensive coordinator. And then I linked a tweet that I put in 2023 saying that I wanted Jim Leonhard as defensive coordinator for the Bills. Quick little backstory for myself personally on why I like this, but then schematically why I think it would be good. I liked Jim Leonhard when he came out of Wisconsin. He was just one of those dudes I attached to in college football for whatever reason. I thought he was a good player. And then he ends up on the Bills and he played a little bit, but I wanted him to play more. It makes no sense. I was a little kid at the time, but I just thought he was like a good player and I liked him. And then he goes to the Ravens. And he's with that 2008 Ravens team. He's making plays in the divisional round against the Tennessee Titans. I just thought he was sweet. And then he's playing safety opposite of Ed Reed. They needed somebody to stabilize that spot. Then he leaves the Ravens. He goes with Rex Ryan to the Jets. He's one of these dudes who's like a coach on the field. He's making plays defensively. He's sweet. So I liked him as a player. I followed him for a little bit throughout his career. And then, he's done playing. Goes to Wisconsin to start coaching. He's their DB's coach in 2016. He's their defensive coordinator and DB's coach from 2017 through 2022. He's the interim coach at the end of the 2022 season. He's got a ton of buzz heading into the 2023 season. But I think there's different reports on like why, but he kind of didn't want to commit to anything. He ends up being a senior football analyst for Illinois in 2023. And then 2024, he joins the Broncos, becomes their DB's coach and pass game coordinator. And then this past year, he was the assistant head coach and defensive pass game coordinator. I have been a fan. Raymond says, Ant waxing poetic about a Rex Ryan guy again. Just kidding. Defensive coordinator Rex Ryan is awesome. Like objectively. Head coach Rex Ryan is something completely different. Defensive coordinator Rex Ryan is pretty sweet. I will sign on that for forever. Like those Ravens teams when Rex Ryan was defensive coordinator, like Rex Ryan's defense, battling versus Dick LeBeau's defense in Pittsburgh, those type of defenses, blitz in the formation and fire zone type deal, odd front 3-4, attack minded. Like that's my type of defense. Like, from a philosophy and like personal enjoyment standpoint, but also from a schematic standpoint and what I like a little bit. And we're going to talk about that, kind of why I think that's good and what that is. We're going to talk about, what Jim Leonhard is, what I like. So pieces, great comment here from Richard, who's already ahead of the ball, saying Jim Leonhard runs a 3-4. Is that a problem for you, or do you think he's adaptable? We are going to talk about that as we go forward. Great question, though, and way to be spot on. So some quick notes on Jim Leonhard and like what he was at Wisconsin and what he's been exposed to at Denver under Vance Joseph. So hybrid fronts and coverages. He's a base 3-4 type of guy, but then at Wisconsin, but would also work in a 2-4-5 and like a 4-down nickel, somewhat similar to what the Bills do. 4 down, under and over front. Bills are usually a 4-down over front, nickel type defense. So he's got some of the Bills stuff in his bag already. I got to stop. Mike, thank you very much for being here. Mike, thank you for the super chat. The comment is, if we get Jim Leonhard as DC, it will mean more to this team than people know. He is an assistant head coach and DC pass coordinator. He will bring the 3-4 back. I sign off on this. I love it and I appreciate it. Well done. Well said. I'm going to keep linking into that. So again, hybrid fronts and coverages, really good fun, simulated and creeper pressures. That's part of the reason I loved him in Wisconsin. If you watch the show, if you did a disguise coverage bingo, simulated pressure and creeper pressure is probably something I say multiple times every show. That's kind of where I'm at with that. So hybrid fronts and coverages, really good and fun schematically and effective, simulated and creeper pressures, fluid personnel adaptations, streamlined calls that have presentation complexities to both confuse and attack offenses, match and rules-based coverages, something I love. It's just hard to necessarily implement because you have to have rules. Everybody's got to be sound and understand everything. Oh, good comment here from Aaron saying, I spent 4 to 5 hours in Dave Aranda seminars today. The Bills better get Leonhard. So Jim Leonhard has ties to Dave Aranda, who was once the DC at Wisconsin. He is now currently the head coach of Baylor. So Leonhard has some ties to that Aranda tree a little bit. That's fair. Oh, and then Aaron following up saying, also, if the Bills get Leonhard, Carl Dunbar just got fired today. Oh, I didn't see that news. Would be a great fit. Well said, Aaron. Charles says mug front bingo. I think that's fair. So that's just some of the pieces, right? Also from the Denver time, what you've got with Vance Joseph in this defense, right? A lot of single high stuff, a lot of man coverage, but also within that, again, a lot of match coverage pieces. So single high, you're going to get cover 1, you're going to get cover 3, cover 1 is man, cover 3 is zone, but you're going to get match coverage stuff even within the single high world. Also from the time in Denver, you are going to get a bunch of what Denver has done and what Vance Joseph has done, which is tied to what Wade Phillips used to do. Bill should know this. 5-man pressure stuff, right? Who's coming? Who's rushing? What are you doing? You're going to get 5 down up front. You're going to tie that in with coverage and match principles on the back end. It's really cool stuff schematically in terms of what they are and what they've been. Also, I want to tie this piece of what Vance Joseph's defense has been this year in the past couple of years, tying this in with Jim Leonhard. So this is what Vance Joseph, and again, Jim Leonhard, DB's coach and pass game coordinator on the defensive side for the Broncos, and then assistant head coach and defensive pass game coordinator this year. So heavily in terms of coverage, pass game coordination stuff, DBs, all that stuff. So this quote is very relevant. This is from Vance Joseph. When he talks about his defense, he says, quote, I don't call a lot of man. What we do is mostly pressure up front with matchup principles in the back end. It's like playing a box and one defense in basketball. It's zoned outside, or it's zoned inside and match outside. These days, the beauty of playing great defense in this league is the ability to have different structures. If you can get DBs close to wide receivers without giving it that man tag, quote unquote, that's the expertise. Because when you call man, the player has to cover both sides of the route. In this league, that's difficult. Everyone has great receivers. The quarterbacks are so accurate. With what we call, we're giving the player one side of the route, and we preach leverage. If you win your leverage outside and the receiver breaks inside, you're going to have a teammate there. It can look like man, but it's not man. That's the beauty of what we do. That's the secret. I love that. Again, match principles, the combination of things, right? Playing true man and then playing more of that man match type of defense, tying it in with the single high aspect, tying it in with being hybridized fronts, 5 down. I'm an odd front kind of guy. I'm a 3-4 type of guy. It's just what I've always gravitated towards. But in today's NFL, I think if a 3-4 or just an odd front in general, I think it gives you more organic answers to changing the pre to post snap picture on quarterbacks. And I think that is the core and the crux of what you need is a good defense in today's NFL. And so much of it is talked about, disguising coverages, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, name of the show. So much of changing the pre to post snap pictures, the conversation on the back end, right? Okay, we're showing 2 high, we're going to spin to single high. We're going to show single high, we're going to spin to 2. We're running a non-traditional Tampa. We're running Tampa 2 Robert or Tampa 2 invert. We are running cover 8. We're running cover 6. We are running split field coverages. And, we're locking the backside of a 3-by-1. And then we're taking that safety from that side and we're poaching him to the other side. Or we're running tricks and he's looking for that crosser coming from number 3. And all these things. There's so many rules and picture change pieces that are talked about on the back end. But the picture change pieces up front, I think, are so important. That's why I love simulated pressures. That's why I love creeper pressures. Leonhard is very adept at the coverage pieces on the back end, teaching guys rules for match-based coverages. If you can play match-based coverages, I think you're in such a good place as a defense. The easiest coverage to play is cover 1, right? Single high man coverage. If you have the horses for it, if you have the dudes for it, play cover 1. If your dudes are that good and you can dare teams to try and beat your corners, you're golden, man. You are living on Dream Street. But it's hard to have those horses and win that regularly, especially in today's NFL with how skewed the rules are towards the offense. Plus, you still need to have pressure up front and all this stuff. If you are good with a match coverage type of deal and your rules are sound and your players understand it, it's really beautiful stuff. When you can have that type of coordinated dance, and it's not easy to have that, but when you can have that, I love that. So everything he does is up my alley, from the hybridized fronts, the sims and the creepers, the odd front structure, tying it in with the coverage and making everything married and as one from the front to the back, single high stuff, match coverage pieces, all of that. Now, how it ties into the Bills. I'm going to talk more about some Jim Leonhard stuff in a minute to kind of break him down further, but I want to talk about how that ties into the Bills, since a lot of us in the chat here are kind of asking about that. We'll start from the back end. Yes, I think this is fine for Benford and Hairston. Marty, you asked that. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. I think Benford can man up on dudes. I think Hairston can man up on dudes. They're fine in zone. And I think they're capable of playing match stuff. Benford's already done it. Hairston will have to learn a bit more of it with how he played at Kentucky, but I think he's capable of it from a skill set standpoint. I don't know what he has between the ears, but I think he can accomplish that. Safety. What I think is interesting here, and I'm going to make this kind of somewhat of a bigger point. I think the ideal fit, and this hurts my heart a little bit to say because I love Taron Johnson. I think the ideal role for Cole Bishop is to be a big nickel or the apex. I think in an ideal world, you move Bishop into Taron Johnson's spot. I think Cole Bishop gives you a little bit more of a skeleton key factor there as the apex and the big nickel, and then you get 2 new safeties. I don't think Taron Johnson's going anywhere because of his contract. I also am not completely out on Taron, although I know he had a down year in 2025. I think Taron's going to be back, and I think Cole Bishop is going to be one of your safeties. If you're playing more single high, Cole Bishop is very, very good at being that down safety. Anything that gets him in and around the box is a win for Cole Bishop and the Bills. Anything that gets him to play in the role that he was at when he was at Utah, when him and Sione Vaki were the 2 safeties there, and they were doing a lot of monster man, big nickel, apex type of stuff there, I'm all for that. That's where he succeeds. Let him man cover tight ends in and around the line of scrimmage. Let him man cover running backs. Let him sit in the hook curls and the curl flats. Let him do all that stuff. The plays that he was making this year, granted, he made some deep. He made some stuff happen from a two high alignment deep downfield. He made some plays from a single high alignment, right? I don't think he's horrible coming from depth. I do think he's still a work in progress there, and he has improved a little bit. But I think setting him up for success and allowing his skill set to flourish is him being the down safety, him being a box safety, him being more of the Jordan Poyer than the Micah Hyde. So if you're playing a lot of single high stuff, that's perfect. Even if you're playing cover 1, cover 3, if you're looking at it pre-snap or you're spinning to a post-snap, let him be that down safety. You can play cover 3 Sky where he's in the curl to flat. You can play cover 3 Buzz where he's in the hook curl. I don't care. That is awesome. That's fine, right? And he can also spin to the post every once in a while and be your single high post safety. Now, that means, regardless of what defense you're in, right? But especially if you're a defense that's going to play a little more single high, you need a rangy ball hawk as the other safety to play in the post and complement Cole Bishop. Can't be someone that's completely siloed, right? Just needs to be someone that's a little more Micah Hyde than he is Jordan Poyer. Again, nobody yell at me. I know Jordan Poyer could also play in the post. I know he could also play deep. I know Hyde could also play in the box and do all that kind of stuff, right? They redefined the safety position. They removed the free and strong from the labels for safety, right? And they both just became safeties. But I think you need to pair Cole Bishop with a rangy ball hawk type of safety on the back end. I don't think that guy's currently on the roster. I don't think Taylor Rapp is that guy. I would love if Jordan Hancock's that guy, but I don't think Jordan Hancock's that guy. I don't think DeMar Hamlin's that guy. I think you need to draft that guy or sign that guy. Kobe Bryant from Seattle is somebody that I am very attracted to as a free agent. I think he's going to cost a little bit too much. Plus, his missed tackle rate jumped significantly in 2025 and almost doubled versus what it was in 2024. But he also made some good tackles as well. You got to pair Cole Bishop with a ball hawk rangy type of safety on the back end, especially if it's Jim Leonhard's defense, but even if it's someone else's defense. Now, let's move to the linebackers, right? Part of what Leonhard did in his tenure and in his time at Wisconsin was the linebackers that he used and the guys that he had, throughout his tenure. You had Leo Chenal there, who now plays for the Chiefs. You had Nick Herbig, who is now at the Steelers and plays off the edge there. You had Jack Sanborn. You had dudes that were thumpers and could play the run, more true 3-4 linebackers, right? Guys who can rush off the edge, guys who can drop into coverage, guys who can function inside on in sub packages. They can play off ball, they can play on the line, they can contribute to a 5 down front, right? Or they can drop those hybridized type of dudes. The linebacker position becomes very important. That's where I think a lot of significant changes are going to be made. Again, Terrell Bernard, injury history, even if we're looking at it right now, right? Matt Milano's money got moved around. I am going to confirm right now what I'm about to say to make sure I am not crazy. Yeah, Matt Milano, Matt Milano's a UFA this offseason, but he has a cap hit of $11 million because he's got a void year this year. He's got a void year this year with a cap hit of $11 million, and he's got a void year next year that has a cap hit of 4.889. God, that's brutal. But Matt Milano's a UFA. As of right now, you already, even if you're just playing the regular defense you had this past year, you need a starting linebacker opposite of Terrell Bernard, even if he's your starter. I think you need to move Bernard to Will and get yourself a bigger thumping middle linebacker. Not complete thumper, right? I'm not looking for Levon Kirkland. I'm not looking for Donta Hightower. I'm not saying that. You need more of a Devin Lloyd. You need more of a Foye Oluokun, right? That type of presence, which is why I understand a little bit why CJ Allen is getting mocked to the Bills in some mock drafts, although I think his coverage leaves a little to be desired. Linebacker from Georgia. Conversation for another time. But linebacker becomes very interesting because you look at these linebackers. Is it going to be Dorian and Bernard? Dorian's made progress. I still don't love him as a true starter in anything. Linebacker is going to need some upgrading depending on, who. Are you getting like an outside linebacker, more of an edge rusher kind of guy, or are you using your edges or defensive ends more as those type of guys? But linebacker would need some addressing. And as the conversation says, so yeah, you need guys like Zach Bond. You need guys like Van Ginkel. You need those type of body types. You need those type of skill sets. You need Leo Chenals. You need Jack Sanborns. Think of his Wisconsin linebackers at that time, right? Or go into, I was saying, I think Am I crazy? Or Van Ginkel was, yeah, I was saying Van Ginkel's a Wisconsin guy. So is Zach Bond. Yeah, just get all the Wisconsin linebackers that currently exist in the NFL. But those are the type of dudes that you need. The Zach Bonds, the Van Ginkels, guys that can play up on the line, who can play off ball. The Bills don't have those linebackers. That's not what they're built right now. You need guys that have some arm length, guys that can rush the quarterback a little bit off the edge, guys that can drop into coverage. That linebacker spot becomes a hybridized spot. The Bills currently don't have that. Defensive line, I think, is interesting. I think Greg Rousseau can be a stand-up edge in a 3-4 defense. He's shown, actually, he can be pretty adept in coverage. So I got no problem dropping him in the hook curls or even in the flats. I think he's fine. He's got the length to just play that type of edge. Good as a run defender, you're good to go there. Michael Hoyt, I think, as the comment just came in and asked about Michael Hoyt. Michael Hoyt, similar deal. You can play him as an edge in a 3-4 and be fine. And then same thing in sub packages, kick him into the inside, do all that kind of stuff, right? So I think you're okay with Hoyt. I think you're okay with Rousseau as your edges there. Obviously, you need to reinforce a little bit. I didn't love the Landon Jackson pick last year. I still don't love it now. I don't know. I don't love his fit in general, or him as a player. I think his fit is questionable in a 3-4, an odd front structure, similar for Javon Solomon. You're going to have to address the edge position. You need more of a 3-4 odd front type of edge, those type of dudes. Defensive tackle on the interior. Some of the guys you have can still work, right? So Jim Leonhard's base front that he likes to use is, I mentioned the odd front, and some people get referred to as like 3-4 type of deal. But he runs a tight front defense, or he did at Wisconsin. You're still getting a lot of odd front principles and mechanics within the Denver defense as well. But essentially what an odd front is you have a true nose tackle lined up in a zero technique, head up on the center. Your Ted Washington, your Pat Williams, Bills legends. True nose, line head up on the center. You could tilt them, you could shade them a little bit, but you need a nose, line head up on the center. And then your two defensive ends are lined up in 4 eyes, which are on the inside shoulders of your two offensive tackles, right? So you've got a nose, line head up on the center, maybe a little shaded or tilted, but you got a nose, head up on the center, and then you got your defensive ends lined up on the inside shoulders of the offensive tackles. That's a 4-eye. I think Ed Oliver can be a 4-eye. I think TJ Sanders can be a 4-eye. I'm still questionable on TJ Sanders. I wouldn't love TJ Sanders' fit in an odd front, in a tight front, in Jim Leonhard's defense. But maybe he could work a little bit. Deion Walker, I think he would be a solid 4-eye. I think he could moonlight a little bit as a nose. I don't want to get into it too much now, and I hope nobody yells at me. I think Deion Walker had a good year. I think he surpassed my expectations. I don't think he's this stud in the making that a lot of people are making him out to be. And I think his run defense is still a little questionable, though he improved significantly and played much better than I thought he would. He will still get displaced. He will get moved left to right. He will get moved vertically. I don't want him playing as the true nose. I think he's a dancing bear and is athletic. I'd love to get him as a 4-eye in an odd front. Get me a true nose. You need to get a true nose. Deion Walker can live a little bit as the backup nose or rotate in there. You can put Deion Walker as a 4-eye. You have to get a true nose to add to this group. You need, Big Citrus from Iowa. You need a true nose to drop as a stone in the center of your defense. You want somebody to be dropped in there and play that spot, right? That's kind of who you want. That's kind of what you want to be. I don't think it's a complete overhaul or retooling of the defense. The pieces aren't complete like for like. It's not an easy fit or seamless fit, I should say. There is going to be some retooling, right? Because the Bills are, right now, they're a 4-down, over front, 1-gap penetrating type of defense. They are not a tight front, odd front type of structure. They are not a 5-down, regular 5-down front. They are not built for that type of structure fitting the run or that type of structure playing the pass. I do think it could work. Great comment here from David. Yeah, you want Vince Wilfork. That's the nose tackle you want. You want Casey Hampton from the Steelers. You want Haloti Ngata. Drop him in the center. That's who you want. Drop him right on that center. Let him control the A-gaps. He's either, read and react, and, he's kind of controlling the center, or he's attack, react, kind of jack him up, play from there. You might lag him a little bit. You might have him read the center, crash the A-gaps, all that type of stuff, right? You need somebody in the center like a stone to drop control, be in that middle, space mitigate. You need a plugger. You need a eater of worlds at nose tackle. That's what you need. And I think Walker could moonlight as that and rotate in a bit, but I don't think putting him there is ideal, and I don't think that's setting him up for success. Fair. Now, I'm going to do a lot of reading right now. Yeah, Ted Washington, Pat Williams, those type of dudes. And again, that they don't have to be huge. I know a lot of the names we're bringing up. It's not like, okay, so you need a 330-pound guy. You need a 340-pound guy. No, you need someone, granted, a certain size and stoutness and physicalness or frame tends to play best to that type of role, but it's more about the skill set. It's more about the play style. You need someone who's a run defender first, who's a displacement mitigator, who's a block eater, who's a space eater. That's what you need. It could be somebody that's 315 pounds. It could be somebody that's 330 pounds, right? It could be a lot of different things. It could be somebody that's 310. If they know how to play it and they know how to read blocks and they know how to play with leverage and drop the knee and split double teams and reduce their surface area and win with their hands and all these types of pieces and other things that I'm not even mentioning, cool. You could be a 305-pound guy. That works. It's about the skill set and the role. That's not necessarily attached to a certain size or a certain weight or a certain frame, but certain sizes, certain weights, and certain frames do tend to lend themselves better to that role and that skill set. Now, let's read about Jim Leonhard. I went back to watch some of his coaching clinics and today to kind of round out, more. Again, I talked about some notes on what he is schematically and what I've seen from my times watching. I just went back to my notes from like years ago when I've been in love with him since like 2023, 2022 as a defensive coordinator in mind and wanting him to come to the Bills. So I brought up some of my notes in summary, but now I want to go to direct quotes from him, lines from him about who he is, what he is. I'm going to go through, read a bunch. I got to stop because we got a super chat. Jason. Dude, you're so generous. You're killing it this episode. Thank you. Jason says, do you think Shaq can help next year? I know he's a free agent. Do we bring him back? For me, yes. I would take Shaq Thompson back and have him be your middle linebacker. I don't think he's going to cost too much. In an ideal world, you're getting a dude who is like a young stud potentially to get like him in that system and keep him there. I just don't know how the money's going to align. So I would take the high floor known quantity of Shaq. If the Bears cut Edmonds, do you believe he would be a good fit in Leonard's defense? I think you could work with Tremaine Edmonds. I think the athleticism, you could also line him up at edge a little bit, let him do some stuff. We get Edmonds back and let him be a rusher. I think Edmonds would fit. I think Edmonds would be fine. I think he's more of a 4-3 linebacker than he is anything. But I think Edmonds, I would prefer Shaq because I think Shaq is better at block deconstruction and coming downhill. Yeah, K.M. I was waiting for somebody to catch the joke of did I hear Tremaine to edge. I would prefer somebody who's better coming downhill and taking on blocks and block deconstructing. But Edmonds isn't the worst idea. I would prefer Shaq though because of his skill set and his play style. That's fair. Yes, Shaq would help next year. All right, Jim Leonhard. Core beliefs. This is a quote he attributes to Rex Ryan, who he says may have gotten this quote from somewhere else. But Jim Leonhard, football is a simple game complicated by coaches. Jim Leonhard believes players need to learn to think for themselves. Becoming adaptable as a player is extremely invaluable. You try to expose players to the multitude of scenarios they'll face in games, knowing that you're outside the white lines on game day. You're counting on guys to step up and rise up and play in positive ways. You have to give them room to grow and room to think. His core beliefs Nick saying trade everything for Styles. Ooh, Sonny Styles, linebacker from Ohio State. That would work and that would be fun. So his core beliefs, 4 of them: consistency, efficiency, flexibility, and response versus opportunity to learn. Consistency, broken up into several little points. His goal with consistency is to be as fast as possible, his players to be as fast as possible, physical as possible, and as confident as possible. And the majority of coaching takes away from those things. His tenets within consistency, coaching style, being the same guy on a daily basis as far as your approach and how you handle your players, your communication, your energy, everything, being the same guy on a daily basis. Your teach progression. How do you give information to your players? How do you get them to learn a skill or a defense? Is it consistent? Do they know what to expect? Terminology. He likes to make things as clean and concise as possible in terms of his terminology. Routine, daily and weekly. Understanding how do we get to second level and next level things faster, having a routine, sticking to it, improving that, stacking, getting better. Game preparation. I love this quote from him. He says, "We are very complex in what we do in many people's eyes, but with how I ask our guys to coach it and the consistency that we have in how we coach and teach, I think it makes it simple for our guys and they trust what we do." I think that's a highlight in anything that you've seen from Jim Leonhard. Is his defense is complex, but there's simplicity within how complex it is, right? There's not a ton of stuff for the sake of a ton of stuff. There's adjustments layered on top of a core base that he's able to go with. So you have checks and you have balances and you have adjustments within everything that isn't throwing everybody completely for a loop. There's not a shift or a change in personnel or a change in formation or alignment, and you see everybody frantically trying to figure out. They know their checks, they know their adjustments, they know what they are because they're complex in what they do, but Jim Leonhard and his staff have the ability to make that complexity simplistic, teach it to the guys, and get them to understand. That's very important too when you have a match-based coverage type of system on the back end, because that means it's rule-based. Match coverage is all, hey, I'm player A, I'm watching player B and C. If B does this, I do that. If C does that, I do this. And that's for if you're player A, if you're player X, if you're player W, and everybody has to see the same thing at the same time. They all have to know, okay, if player B does this, I do number one. If player B does that, I do number two. Okay, now I'm keying on player C. If player C does this, I do number three. All of that. And everybody's got to see it. The corner has to see it. The safety has to see it. The apex has to see it. The mic has to see it. The will on the other side has to see it, right? The opposite corner, the opposite safety, all of that. Everybody's got to see everything at the same time from a coverage structure standpoint. There's a lot of teaching. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of theory and turning it into practical application. Jim Leonhard has a ton of success in doing that. And again, more quotes from him. What can you effectively get your guys to do on a consistent basis? Anything more than that is a waste. And you're not really doing your players justice as far as what you're trying to get accomplished. If you're not doing that, you're not putting the game in their hands to let them win for you. I think that is very telling. If you're not doing that, you're not putting the game in their hands to let them win for you. That is what his belief is, right? Preparing guys, giving them rules that are simple, right? But not so simple that they can be deciphered by the offense, right? So giving them things that are complex to an offense, but are simple for his guys to learn and understand and put into practical application, putting the game in their hands and letting them win for you. Again, giving your players room to grow and room to think. All of that type of deal, right? And I think that, again, that's everything. You need your players playing fast mentally and physically. It's not just, oh, well, that team plays so fast because everybody runs a 4-4. It's how you process. It's what you understand. Are you prepared for this formation in this situation? Do you know what's coming? Are you anticipating what's coming? Have you been able to narrow down, okay, in this situation, they're likely going to do A, B, or C, and you know what you're doing in all of those, and you know what your checks are. And everybody knows that, and everybody thinks like that. He's really adept at that, and it's super important to him. Again, one of his core beliefs and core tenets. So that's everything tied to consistency. Next is efficiency. He says he's not a first in, last out type of guy. He believes you find any ways possible to do your job as well as you can and as efficiently as you can. Always challenge yourself to do better and don't waste time. Can you do your job better? Can you do your job quicker? And how can you get your players better faster? Love that. Another core belief, flexibility. We're going to talk about this a bunch. He talks about it throughout anything at Wisconsin, times in Denver, all of it. Flexibility. Again, his base defense is a tight front, the 4-eye, 0, and a 4-eye. His nickel defense is a 4-down, over front, sometimes an under front. He has implemented both. His tenets within flexibility, build a sound scheme, build in flexibility for complex problems, and then have less calls, but more possible adjustments. He says this calms our guys down. We can teach the basis of what we do. We can teach all of the finer details and then have minor adjustments to what we do rather than have more on top of more. We start with almost bare bones and then add to a game plan based on what the issues we're going to see, based on how we can dictate. So He starts at the bare bones level, the basic level, and then they add to a game plan based on what they're going to see from an offense, personnel-wise, situational-wise, run concept-wise, pass concept-wise, all of that. That, again, you're tying it into the matchup of the opponent. This isn't the Sean McDermott defense where it's like, hey, or Bobby Babbitt defense where, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to play our defense, you know who we are and what we do, and then we're going to adjust from there. He is tailoring a game plan within his scheme, right? He's tailoring that game plan week in and week out based on what the opponent is and who the opponents are, based on how he can dictate to them. And that's a big piece, being able to dictate to the offense, playing on the front foot versus an offense, something you've heard me say a lot for what I think this Bills defense needs. This is a great quote coming up now and very telling from Jim Leonhard. He says, quote, "I never want to be a counterpuncher. I always want us to have things in our game plan that we can dictate the flow to an offense. You need these offenses to have to go over to the sideline and find an answer. And the more flexibility you have within your scheme and the more ways you have to be that, throwing that jab or throwing some of those uppercuts on them, then they have to go make adjustments and not just attack, which is all they want to do." End quote. He wants to put an offense on the back foot. He wants to come out, punch them in the mouth, and dictate them. He wants to make them go over to the sideline and go to their iPads or their Surface tablets and be looking at stuff and trying to figure out what the coverage was or what the front was or how there was a free runner coming off the edge, how their protection rules got manipulated, how their route concepts are getting eaten up, how the defense is properly spacing out the route distributions and nailing down on everything. He wants to play on the front foot. And I love that. And I think that's how you have to play in today's defense. You take it to an offense. You build your game plan week in and week out as much as you can like it's a playoff game where you're a matchup-based defense. It's why Steve Spagnuolo's been great come playoff time. It's why Lou Anarumo has been good come playoff time because they're able to build these matchup-based game plans. They're able to say, we know who you are on offense. We're going to, you throw with your right. We're going to tie your right hand behind your back and see if you can punch us with your left and move your feet. That's what Leonhard does, all while attacking. All while having simulated pressures and creepers and hybridizing his fronts, basing out of that tight, but then also being able to get into nickel, match principles on the back end, single high stuff, man, some zone, but really a lot of man match type of stuff. Good pieces, good stuff. And then his last core principle or core belief, response versus the opportunity to learn. This is more philosophical, but I like this. He says you have the response versus opportunity to learn. And it's broken down into two spots, in the moment and reflective. In the moment, it's like in game, you just got beat. You're a corner, you just got beat for a touchdown, right? You have one opportunity for a response, the next play or that next drive, and you need to respond immediately. How you react to that current situation of adversity. Once the next play is done, it's time to reflect. And when you get into the reflective period, that's like a debriefing. What lessons did you learn? How did you handle your responses in the moment? What was your response in the moment? When you look back on that, are you going to grow as a player? And being reflective and taking that opportunity to learn. I just think, again, these are his core beliefs. I think he's a very smart guy. I think he is sound schematically and sound in terms of player development. He was a guy who's tremendously loved and respected in Wisconsin, and it appears to be the same in Denver. Man coverage principles for him in coverage, winning position, eye discipline, flexibility again. Talking about defensive backs and having versatility. This is when he was with the Broncos. He talks about and he says you need versatility in your DBs, whether it's flexibility between corners and safeties or being able to play outside and inside. You can't hide guys anymore in your DB room. You have to be able to communicate and think. If you can't play inside the numbers, they're just going to put their best receiver in there and work those matchups. He understands offenses. He understands schemes. He understands systems. He understands how to implement things, build, coach, teach. I don't get this hype often for an individual coach. Like I said, if anybody cares, wants to pull receipts, I've been tweeting about Jim Leonhard and me wanting him as Bills defensive coordinator since 2023. I went back and looked it up today and linked it in one of the tweets I posted. I'm a big college football guy. Guys know that. I watch just as much college football as I do NFL football, which is saying something because there's like a million college football games every week. I loved what he did at Wisconsin, and he took those teams that really had no offense and he made them pretty successful with what they were defensively and the guys that he rotated in. And it's because they were sound. And it's tying to all these principles. It's tied to, the flexibility and having a sound scheme and building in flexibility for complex problems and being able to dictate to offenses and play on the front foot and make them play reactively and play on the back foot and have to play while retreating. He understands what it takes to kind of run a group. He comes from a good tree. He's got a lot of good influences. Aaron in the chat mentioned earlier, watching all the Aranda stuff. It's because he's tied to Dave Aranda. And then what he's learned with Vance Joseph in Denver these past couple of years and how good those defenses have been. I know you might say that as a Bills fan and be like, well, the Bills put up 30 on them and still had 5 turnovers. The Bills are a good foil for the Broncos defense. But on the whole, the Broncos defense has been one of the better defenses in the league the past several years. And it's tied to a lot of the coverage structure stuff they do on the back end. And that Vance Joseph quote that I read earlier in terms of, what we do is mostly pressure up front with matchup principles on the back end. And you're going to get a lot of that. He's going to blitz. He's going to bring pressure looks. He's going to show 5, bring 5. He's going to show 5, bring 3. He's going to show 5, bring 4. He's going to show 5, bring 6, and a multitude of other combinations from that, right? You'll get true pressures, true blitzes, which are 5 or more rushers. You're going to get sims. You're going to get creepers, simulated pressures, 4-man rush, dropping a non-traditional coverage guy and bringing a non-traditional rusher. So simulated pressure is showing 5 at the line, and you bring 4, but it's 3 defensive linemen and a linebacker, and you're dropping a defensive end or a defensive tackle into coverage. Creeper pressure is the same thing, except you're not showing pressure beforehand. You're just off ball, lining up regular 4 down front, and then you bring a guy. I really like what he's about schematically. I really like what he's about philosophically and ideologically, and the identity that he builds with his defense. I do think, they could bring him in. I think he could make some things work with what they have, but I do think it is something where you're going to have to churn this roster a little bit. You're going to have to bring some Jim Leonhard guys in or some odd front, hybridized front type of guys in. The linebacker room is going to have to change a little bit. There's going to be some growing pains there. The defensive line room, interior and on the edge, is going to have to change a little bit. There's going to be some growing pains there. I think on the coverage side, you're largely fine with Hairston, Benford, and Cole Bishop. I would love to bring Trey White back as your corner 3. I think that would be awesome. We'll see what happens with Dorian Strong. But I think on the back end, you just need a rangy ball hawk safety to pair with Bishop. But the front, the front 7, however you want to label it, the linebackers and the defensive line, you're going to have to do some churning there. I don't think it's something you can completely overhaul in one offseason. It took Mike McDonald a couple of years to tool everything in Seattle, and look where they are now. So I think there's going to be some growing pains. You need to have some patience. I don't think that means the defense would be a disaster in 2026. And it's just like, hey, everybody give it a chance. But I do think there would be some churn this offseason and likely next offseason to kind of get this defense where they want it to be, just because of the tweaks that they're going to have to do up front and what you're going to have to do, at defensive line and linebacker within that upfront piece. But I'm very excited. This is a personal thing for me. This is personal because I like him, and the type of defense he runs is the type of defense that I gravitate towards, both in terms of how he teaches it and how he calls it, and the play style and identity and ideology and philosophy, all of that. But also objectively, and again, there's some arbitrariness to it, but this is what I believe you need to be in today's NFL to be successful. Unless you're going to be the Texans and just have an amazing defensive line highlighted by 2 all-world edges and having, 2 really good linebackers, and then having a really good, skeleton key type of big nickel in Jalen Petrie, and then having the best corner tandem in football in Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter, and then having Kalen Bullock as a really good single high safety who can do whatever, unless you're just going to roll out dudes who are just violent and better than everyone else and say, good luck, beat us. You need to have some more scheme to your game. And I think he would just be such a great get. Adrian's Game City for Anthony. Can you give us the link to the article? It's not an article. A lot of what I read, it's plucked from different pieces. Some of it is from my own notes. Some of it is from different coaching pieces. But if you go to YouTube and let's see, hold on here. I'm going to find it for you. If you go to YouTube and you type in Jim Leonhard coaching clinic, it's titled it for me, it's the sixth or fifth one down. The video is titled Football Philosophy Core Beliefs. It's 13 minutes and 41 seconds long, and it breaks down a bunch of what I just said. Again, some of what I read here is from that. Some of it is from my own notes and just what I've known throughout the years. But what I read verbatim here is from that. So it kind of gives you a peek into his inner mind and the workings of it. So you're not just basing it off of my analysis. But yeah, so go type in Jim Leonhard Coaching Clinic on YouTube, and it's the one titled Football Philosophy Core Beliefs. Not a ton of views, only 758 views right now, but it's cool. I think there's a good chance he comes here. I don't want to say that. Let me backtrack. I'm too superstitious for that. I'm frustrated with a lot of decisions right now with this team, just what they've done for a couple of years with roster construction and then what we've seen so far this offseason. I said it on Twitter. I said it on Blue Sky. This would make me forgive so much if they hired Jim Leonhard as their defensive coordinator. I would love this. But again, I do think there's going to be some growing pains. I do think there's going to be some roster churn. I do think it's not going to happen overnight because they are limited with cap space and some draft capital. You already have to invest in the defense and part of it too, right? You already have to invest in the defense this offseason. AJ Epinesa is a UFA. Joey Bosa is a UFA, right? And Nick says 700 views from Ant and 58 from the rest of the world. That's fair. So you've got 2 tickets to paradise. You've already got a defense that needs to be retooled, right? Like, are you moving Bernard to Will, or are you keeping Bernard at Mike and you're signing a Will? Or are you not? Is Dorian Williams going to be that guy? Do you think he can be that guy? What are you doing at edge? Because Bosa's a UFA and AJ Epinesa is a UFA. Is Javon Solomon ready to take on a bigger load? Is Landon Jackson? How healthy is Michael Hoyt going to be? Is he ready for the start of the season? At defensive tackle, you've got Ed Oliver, Deion Walker, TJ Sanders. TJ Sanders is still kind of unknown at this point, although you can play devil's advocate and say he had to play out of position for this year. But this year was kind of a lost year for him, and I don't think he looked great for the most part. Dwayne Carter's coming off an Achilles, but he was very underwhelming as a rookie. You've already got to add to your defensive line. So having to switch the scheme and switch the structure isn't the biggest ask in the world because you already have to add to those position groupings. So instead of adding to those position groupings for what you've been schematically, in past lifetimes under Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich, add to those position groupings up front for a new scheme and a new structure. You already need to add bodies up front. Just add them for a new scheme and a new structure. Similar conversation to the linebacker spot as well. And then at safety, I think you need a rangy ball hawk to pair with Cole Bishop anyway, but especially if you're going to play more single high stuff like Leonhard and the Broncos have done these past couple of seasons, and especially this past year. Joe says, here's the simple approach. Trade the first for Jefferson, sign Romeo Doubs, and re-sign Cooks, then use every other pick you have on defense. Fair. Done and dusted. There you go. I do like Romeo Doubs a lot. My issue is he would help the Bills offense. I still think you need more Alec Pierce than you do Romeo Doubs if we're going to go from that. Or if they could afford him, I would take Mike Evans on like a 1-year deal just because I love Mike Evans and he's still a really good player. You need more vertical presence and field stretching. So you need more Alec Pierce than you do Romeo Doubs. I think Doubs will be cheaper than Pierce, but I would welcome Doubs, but I think you need more of an Alec Pierce than you do a Romeo Doubs if we're looking at the free agency list. But I don't dislike that approach. And yes, then you use every other pick you have on defense. I know people aren't. Yeah, Swin says you got to draft defense again. Laugh out loud. It sucks, but you have to. 1,000%. I know people aren't going to like it, especially with you got to help Josh Allen and the receivers and center and left guard and all this stuff. You have to draft defense. Again, like I kind of laid it out, and I'm going to get into it more in the roster show and the kind of the recap and the go forward and my outlining of the offseason, likely next week, unless something crazy happens again. But you already need, even if you're not changing the scheme, even if everything stays, right? Even if Sean McDermott stayed, Bobby Babich stayed, nobody changed defensively and the scheme and the structure was going to stay the same, you already have to add to your defense. Even if you're not talking scheme change or structure change, you already have to add to the defense. You have to add to your edge grouping. And somewhat significantly, I still think Greg Rousseau is more of an edge 2 than he is an edge 1. So you need to add to your edge grouping. You need to add to your interior. You need to add at linebacker. You need to add at safety, like starters and depth for essentially all those positions for me, depending on how you view Deion Walker. But yeah, you need a lot of help on defense. That's why, again, I think like this offseason, moving to scheme to change the scheme and structure. Oh man, we're going from a 4-3 to, again, I don't want to simplify because it's not just going from a 4-3 to a 3-4, but I know that's a lot of understandable terminology for folks. So even if you're just going from a 4-3 to a 3-4, that's not crazy because you have to add bodies to that side of the ball anyway via free agency in the draft. So this would be a good offseason to do it because you already have to add those bodies. It's not like, well, we're pot committed and, we've already got a solid locked in starting 11 from a contract perspective and from a skill perspective and from an effectiveness perspective. You don't have that. There's questions about the effectiveness. There's questions about the effectiveness. There's questions about the quality. There's questions about the depth. And even if there wasn't, you still have to add bodies. Like you don't have enough bodies. So you might as well switch the scheme while you're at it. Jason, I appreciate you again. You're crushing it. Jason says, agree, Anthony. I think Leonhard's scheme maximizes the abilities/skill sets of players, not covering up their deficiencies. Football IQ is important or you're not playing, period. Well said. I should have just put this up and I wouldn't have had to say anything else. Sincerely, that's a really good comment. Spot on. I'm going to leave this comment up as I take a drink of water because I am ridiculously... Man, that wasn't enough. That was enough to wet my whistle, but I need to keep going. I'm so thirsty. Yeah. He's a guy who maximizes his guys' talents with his scheme. Like you can have dudes, but he's good at maximizing things schematically, even when you don't have the dudes, which I really like. And again, I think his structure and scheme naturally lends itself to today's NFL, where you're trying to change the pre to post snap picture on quarterbacks up front and on the back end. You're bringing some blitzes, you're bringing some sims and some creepers, which are all your safe pressures, quote unquote, because you're still dropping 7 into coverage. You're multiple on the back end, you're multiple up front. You're playing match coverage, having good rules. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I've liked him for years. Again, this is not, I feel like you have to say a disclaimer now because so many people ride the hype and ride the wave. This is not like, well, I started looking him up today and I got super hype and I hadn't heard him on it before. I wanted Jim Leonhard for several years and a very long time. And I've liked him ever since he was a player. Again, for those of you who don't know, like Ed Reed's my favorite player of all time. So when the Bills would fall apart in the drought, I would be like, okay, I'm going to switch my focus to the Ravens, and I hope the Ravens win the Super Bowl. And that 2008 Ravens team will sincerely forever, live in my heart with them going, it just how they went down, who they beat, losing to the Steelers in the stupid AFC Championship game. But that was the year with Ed Reed's awesome interceptions against the Dolphins in the wild card round. And then they were the 6th seed, which was the final seed and the last wild card seed at the time. Joe Flacco's rookie year. They go to Tennessee. They beat the 1 seed Titans in Tennessee. Chris Johnson gets hurt early in that game after he was gashing the Ravens, which was a huge piece, but the Ravens shocked Tennessee and beat them 13-10 in Tennessee. I've been a fan of Jim Leonhard since his playing days at Wisconsin. I liked him with the Bills. I liked him with the Ravens. I liked him with the Jets. So he's a player who I liked just because of how smart he was and how he played despite not being the biggest or the fastest or the most athletically gifted dude. He was just in the right places, making the right plays, sound and fundamental. And that's how his defenses play. Sound, fundamental, flexible, smart, attack-minded. Again, everything that I read. I could not be higher on Jim Leonhard. He is, I don't want to say he's the only defensive coordinator candidate that I want, but he's what I want. I'm not even thinking of other defensive coordinators. I am manifesting this to the universe. If they sign him, a lot will be forgiven from me and for me, which means they probably won't have him. They'll probably get somebody else or he'll sign somewhere else and break my heart because that's how this offseason is going. But yeah, Jim Leonhard's awesome. Hope this answered a lot of questions for you folks. I'm contemplating if they sign Jim Leonhard and ink him as the defensive coordinator. I'll probably cut this up and to put it as its own episode for people to kind of see and dive into fully, so you don't have to scroll through this full 2-hour long episode here. Yeah, Spin says people are more hype on Jim Leonhard than Brady. I absolutely am. I think Brady's fine. I think, and Swin says, this is getting me excited the way you're talking about Leonhard. I'm ready for disappointment. So am I. I know with how happy I am and excited I am that they're not going to get him and he'll go somewhere else or do something crazy or like retire from football just to break my heart or our hearts. But yeah, it takes a lot for me to truly like love somebody as a player or as a coordinator. And again, this is not to keep saying it, but like this has been years in the making for me. I've liked him since, COVID times at Wisconsin and what he was doing. I just thought his defenses were so cool. And again, they weren't getting like these crazy studs. It's not like Wisconsin was like, granted, Herbig has been like a good dude, but you weren't getting these regular like college game records. Like you had some guys who turned into solid players in the NFL and who have developed, but you weren't getting guys like, oh man, remember that Wisconsin defense led by this amazing all-pro type of whatever. Like he got the most out of his dudes and he was really good schematically and sound while he was at it. And again, it's highlighted by his core beliefs. And what's cool too is you can read about somebody or hear them speak and like, oh, that's his core beliefs. Those are his fundamental principles. And you can see that and read that and then watch his teams play and be like, that's not how they play. That doesn't make any sense. Like, what is he talking about? Jesse Minter was a guy like that. Like we talked about on last week's show. He has his core fundamental principles. Jesse Minter does. And he's that type of guy where you're like, oh, got it. Like his 4 pillars, effort and angles, block deconstruction, ball disruption, and obnoxious communication. Like you see that in his defenses in college and in the NFL. And it's same with Jim Leonhard. Like you see, granted, you can't see some of the consistency pieces because those are off the field and how he builds the team. But you see with, their efficiency, their flexibility, their sound scheme, the adjustments and the complexity within it, but the straightforwardness and the simplicity of it, the hybridized fronts, the attack mindedness, the matchup mindedness, playing on the front foot, making offenses play on the back foot and have to be responsive and adjust. Really cool. Really cool, really cool, really cool. I'm very excited. I'm underwhelmed with the Joe Brady hire as, head coach. And I think there's a lot of contradiction with the verbiage of what he's going to be versus what he's doing and the reports coming out. And I think there's so much mess there. I'm trying to focus on the Jim Leonhard piece and get excited for that until they break my heart and, decide not to bring him in, which would absolutely destroy me. You know what wouldn't break my heart and wouldn't destroy me? The best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. If you have not had it, you are missing out. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, great cheese to sauce ratio. If you get multiple toppings, they chop them up evenly, sprinkle them across the pie. They do an amazing breakfast pizza. They have good salads. Joe DeRosa is lying. So Joe says, my favorite pizza, loved it so much. This is the kind of guy Joe DeRosa is. I was telling him nonstop, hey, when you come here, go to One Pie. You got to get One Pie. He agreed. He goes to One Pie. He went too late. They were sold out of pizza that day. You know why? Because they sell out. You know why? Because they are the best. Joe was lackadaisical. He was lazy. He lacked conviction and he lacked faith and he missed out on that One Pie pizza. And it's something he truly and sincerely regrets. Why? Because it is the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. And I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because they are the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. And I truly believe that. It brings me absolute joy. So if you are down and sad about Sean McDermott, or you're underwhelmed about Joe Brady, or you're hopeful and excited about Joe Brady or what's been going on, if you're sad, if you're happy, if you're whelmed, underwhelmed, overwhelmed, even keeled, whatever, One Pie will help you feel better or feel even better if you're already feeling good or feeling better. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. They also have a catering division called Elevated Catering of Buffalo. That can be found in the episode show notes as well. I've had them cater multiple events for me and my family and friends over the past couple of years. They do not miss. Of course, I've gotten pizzas with it, but I've gotten that, salads, their mac and cheeses. They offer a bunch of different mac and cheese dishes, a bunch of different chicken and rice dishes, like sandwiches and bread. Like everything just slaps. Absolutely good when you get some One Pie Pizza. Don't be like Joe DeRosa and miss out. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. You will not regret it. If you folks are still here, I'm throwing up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because we're going to start to wind down. Joe says it all caps. I tried, and I was so sad when I couldn't get it. he texted me about it too. He was like, dude, I went to go get one pie and they were sold out. And I was like, you're missing out. If you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. I know it's corny to ask for that. And I know it's corny to say, I know it's corny because I say this every time I do this spiel. Likes sincerely are the lifeblood of these episodes and of these streams. So if you enjoyed this content, if you enjoyed this episode, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video if you enjoyed this content. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. Tell your family, friends, loved ones about this episode, about the show. If you hated me or you hated this episode or hated the show, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day by making them watch this episode instead. Larry says, thoughts. I'm bringing Cooks back for a full season. Think he will thrive even more, especially if we get an actual wide receiver one. We'll open the field even more. I would welcome Brandon Cooks back. I think he has some unfortunate drops, but I think if he's, in more of a wide receiver 3 or a wide receiver 4 role, more power to him. I think he's a professional. You could tell that the loss affected him as well. He was one of the dudes who spoke in the locker room that seemed pretty sad and let down by what happened. I would welcome him back, not because of that, but I just think he meshed well with Allen and connected well with his team. I would bring him back. Absolutely. Of course, like you said, though, get an actual wide receiver one or get some more top of the depth chart type dudes. I would welcome him back. Everybody stop talking about the Sabres. You're going to jinx it. I'm too afraid to even speak out loud about the Buffalo Sabres, but yes, that's fun right now. It's also the Thanos meme, right? Like the Soul Stone type of deal. Like, oh, the Sabres are good. Like, but what did it cost? The Buffalo Bills. Fair. I hope you folks enjoyed this episode. I hope you're as excited about Jim Leonhard as I am. I hope you feel more excited about Joe Brady than I am. Don't hate it. Again, I think it's fine to love the Brady hire. I think it's fine to hate it. I think it's fine to be in the middle. I personally am underwhelmed. Like if 10 is me being ecstatic and 1 is me hating it and wanting nothing to do with it, I'm probably at like a 4 or a 4.5. I was a little earlier or a little lower earlier in the day. But I got a little better. Oh, I appreciate that kindness in that comment there, Jason. Thank you very much. I've come around on it a little bit. And when I say come around, I mean like I've kind of got more even keeled about it, but I'm underwhelmed mainly because there were other candidates that I preferred and I liked, but you can do pros and cons and play devil's advocate to anyone that they interviewed and anyone that they were going to interview, and tear it apart or build it up if you want. For me, I think it's fine, but I am underwhelmed for the reasons that we talked about at the beginning of this episode. But Jim Leonhard, 10 out of 10, 20 out of 10. I would absolutely love that for why I broke down in this episode. I hope you folks enjoyed this episode sincerely. I put a lot into all these, especially this one where I get to talk about something I really enjoy and really love, in something that's potential and maybe not pie in the sky. It's real and there's real smoke to it. Hopefully there's more fire to that smoke and they bring Jim Leonhard in. Hope you folks enjoyed this episode. Follow me on Twitter, pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. No underscores there, just PROANT. I'm starting to dive into the free agent class and the college football class. I know a lot of people are wide receiver focused. I started putting out some stuff on Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M. Joe, you don't get to make one pie jokes because you stabbed me in the back and you didn't get the one thing I told you to get when you were here. You're a liar and a charlatan and a deceiver, and you don't get to make those jokes because you're a liar and a deceiver and a charlatan. But you were the one that paid because you didn't get the one pie. You're missing out more than one pie is, but you stabbed me in the back. But it's not your fault. But you kind of plunged that knife right in between my shoulder blades. Fair. Hope you folks enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Thank you very much to everybody who rode with me live on this episode. It was awesome to see everyone's questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, the engagement. Always super cool. It's part of the reason we go live on these shows because the chat is so engaging with each other, with me. And I just get lost in a positive way in the comments and in the chat and bringing up everything and making this as interactive and as engagement focused as possible. So thank you to everyone who tuned in live. Please drop a like on this video, turn on notifications for the Disguise coverage playlist. If you're not watching live, that's cool too. Thank you for your post-live view here on YouTube. You can also drop a like, turn on notifications for the Disguise coverage playlist. If you're an audio listener, that's awesome too. Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, whatever have you. Please rate, review, and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening there. Tell your family, friends, and loved ones about this stuff. If you're not a Cover One insider, you should be. Subscribe to the Cover One channel, multitude of shows we got, all that jazz. Thank you very much to Jason for your multitude of super chats in this episode. Sincerely, I'm saying it like laughing with a smirk on my face, but your comments were super thought-provoking, and the kindness of you shelling out, like time anybody shells out any type of like actual dollars for me to sit here and talk about the Bills and talk about football and something that I love, it always sincerely means a lot. But when someone continuously does and it gives like good chunks, like it's just super cool. So thank you very much to Jason for that. Thanos Ron, thank you very much to you. Just a Tippy Canoe, Arthur Kraft, First and 15th to Brian Bash, Jug Glump, and then Mike Check. Appreciate all you for one, being here, two, for the super chats and putting your money where your mouth is and all that kind of stuff. I appreciate you folks and everything that you're doing. And even if you didn't, give a super chat, just being here is awesome. Commenting is awesome. Dropping a like on this video, subscribing, following on Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever form or fashion your support comes in. I sincerely appreciate it, and it means a lot, and it means much more than you know. And I thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched here on YouTube, live or later, or listen on one of the audio platforms. Yeah, just thank you very much. Enjoy what's left of your Tuesday night. If you're here on the East Coast, I hope you have a great rest of your week. And I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you when I see you. Keep tuning in here live every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, as we go on this journey, breaking down anything and everything when it comes to the current roster, the state of it, what the Bills need to do in the future, free agency, draft, film, and advanced metrics, breakdowns, and evaluations. I'll have a ton of tape breakdowns here on the channel as we go forward here on college players and all that stuff. And yeah, I'll see you when I see you. Godspeed. Thank you to everybody for all the kind words in the chat. You guys know I don't bring them up when I'm solo because I think it's weird to bring up positive stuff for myself and pat myself on the back, but I see them. I hear them. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.